Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ian Mann, and I will be the chair of the panel today. I'm joined with me via Zoom, Rod Merritt, panel member, and panel member Lynn Nesbitt. Our assessment department personnel today is Jeremy Pohl, and our administrative personnel is Jaswinder Kumar. We will be hearing applications for revision of the business assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act and the City of Winnipeg Charter. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave, and the process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all of the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 10 on the docket today. Mr. Kumar, would you please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Jeremy Ryan Poole.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Dupont, please state your full name.
Henry Dupont.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
First matter on the docket today is Unit 600 at 185 Carlton Street. Are there any preliminary matters with respect to this property? Gentlemen?
Other than the appellant was late with their entire docket, I'll leave that up to the panel, how they want to handle this.
Okay, thank you. I was aware of that. We'll discuss that during the course of our deliberations. Then, Mr. Pohl, if you would proceed with your presentation, please.
600 Unit 600, 185 Carlton. File number is 224370. Business assessment ID number is 18572. Our total annual rental value is $131,640. The total area is 9,016 square feet, with a total ARV of $14.60 per square foot. Below that, we can see that the average ARV is $12.10 per base rent or net rent, and then the appropriate occupancy costs are to the right of that. We indicate here that this is non-arm's length, although there is a reported rent at $11. So as long as we go through here, we see on page 2 the order from the Board of Revision for the realty side of it. And we see that there was a decrease to $8,222,000 from $10,587,000. And that was based on the evidence presented by the applicant adjusting to expenses of 3%. So they accepted our 3% argument. The rest of it looked like it was based on the applicant. We get to the next page after that is the realty brief. I prepared this docket itself. I wasn't able to present it at hearing. I was sick on that day. And Mr. Nathan Cooper presented it for me and quite well. So below that, as we go through, is just pictures of the property on page 3. Page 3 of that brief, page 5 of our brief would be a business assessment. So on page 6, we see that the PIN is 11,422, and that's the 9,016 at $10, $12.10. So that's what we applied. Below this, on page 7, is the rent roll for the property. We see in highlighted in yellow, this is Lakeview Management. Lakeview Management manages the building itself. And it looks like they expanded into, that's why I've highlighted in red here, into the nearby 2 units of 601 and 600. Because they're not on the rent roll for 9,016. They're on the rent roll for 7,314. So with that, you can see the step-ups relationship, although it does not appear to be a true arm's length rent. So from that point, you can move to the rest of the rent roll, and you can see the rest of the rent roll and the rents that are in place in this building. And you can see that the $11 is low compared to the rest of the units in this building. So with that, we can move on. We see that on the next page, which is just a synopsis of the report I'll get into in a moment, the assessor's OFB study. This is the Johnson report. And we see for units 175, 185 Carlton, it's at $13 they're asking to get in the building. And then for 2020, and then you go back to 2019, they're still asking $13. And then in 2018, they were asking $12.50. So we see an escalation in rent. We're seeing that they're pushing the envelope where they feel they should be at. From that point, I should stop here before we get into the study. That this building was walked through with myself and Rod Slaughter. We went through the building. It stuck out. Because after we were reviewing the numbers, or after I was doing the study, I should say, it wasn't performing quite where we would think it would be. The non-recoverables are exceedingly high. The shortfall was out of whack. Like there was something going on in the building and had long-term vacancy in it. So what we did was when we went through, we saw some new leases going in as far as they were developing certain suites, but also the 175 portion of the building, they looked like they're converting it over to multifamily. And then the main floor rents on this building looks to be mainly retail. So this building has it's in a state of flux. So in order to alleviate some of the long-term vacancy, they're looking to convert over to multifamily. So with that being said, we'll move on to the study. And I encourage you to read the first 2 pages. I don't get a lot of questions from the panel. I'm hoping there aren't any. But I do encourage that you read the first 2 pages. It raises every question that I can in my mind's eye and answers them. So in this case here, I went through the OFA and the OFB inventory, and I did a 6-year analysis on all properties that rent out on a net rent basis. And you see that reflection here today in the study. It's the best information, in my opinion, to determine assessments at a simple basis. So it takes into account and tries to minimize tenant inducement. It stabilizes everything rather than looking at just 1 year, which I do look at the 2020 year. I stabilized the last 3 years, and I look back at a total of 6 years. So we're getting a pretty good analysis on each and every single property that rents, and then how they perform within the marketplace, and then what is the actual marketplace itself on a global basis. So from that, I encourage you to read the commentary on this study here. If we go to page 14, you see that the average rental rate is $12.39 for a 3-year stabilized for the weighted average. And again, I do an average, weighted average, and a median, and then I also do a min-max to catch any low rents or any outline rents. Keep agent, I don't want to say it this way, but keep the agent or keep the assessor on both hands honest. Meaning if you're grabbing low line rent, you can pick that out in the study. If there are a number of CRUs that you're grabbing 5 or 6 or 7 rents that are high or low, you can work your way through it with the study here. We're looking at what the average marketplace is, the weighted marketplace is, and how they perform within the marketplace. So we're not looking at just grabbing outlying rents and using them to artificially create value or lessen value. So From that point, the 2020 year for the weighted average is $14.84. Again, stabilizes $14.39. So what we're saying is within an average, if you're in an average OFB, you should be at about $13.49. If you're an OFB that's performing better or OFB prime, you should be further down the positive end of that graph of the bell curve. If you're in a lower performing OFB, you should be further down the opposite way. And that's reflective here today of the subject property. When we see a $12 rent, we're seeing them outside of the first standard deviation, and we're going into the second standard deviation, which is about mid-range of that. So that's where we have this property, the CRU in this building at, and it's already low. So in my opinion, it's appropriately assessed at the $12 range. As you can see, between $11 and $12, there's only 2 CRUs that rented out in that range, and between $12 and $13, there was 25. And I can tell you at the $12 range, there was about 16 or 17 that did rent out on that. And most of them were, again, about 6 tenancies within the marketplace. So we have 217 CRUs that rented out, and that would be only at about a 6% rate. But in this case here, given the lower performance of the building, it's appropriate. So I don't believe it should be any further than that, considering what they're asking for to get into the building, what they're achieving. So if we go on from that, we can go to the subject property, which is on page 8 of the study, or page 18 of the brief. And you can see 185 Carlton, 175, 185, they're both the same building. They're just 2 different civic addresses. And this is where the numbers started really to come out of whack. As you can see for the subject property, the vacancies are very high. And then you see the shortfall is really high, $23 in the year 2020. And then the non-recoverables are again way out of whack. And that's because it showed up that they were doing a renovation. They were changing the format of the building, and they were repurposing it. So some of those costs are showing up here. Now, I did the study before I got a chance to walk through the building. If I would have known all this, I most likely would have removed this property from the study because it doesn't quite reflect what market is. What you see here is a building in conversion. And again, not all of it is. The 175 portion is. I believe they were doing a little bit of work on the main floor and then the upper floors, which I'm not sure if this was the CRU that they were leasing out, because it was in when we walked through, they were clearly putting tenant bid-ups into for new tenancy. So from that, you can go through the Johnson report information, which again highlights all 6 years, and you can reference 185, 175, 185 Carlton if you wish, but I've already done the last 3 years leading up to the reference date. So getting back to the actual property, or the CRU itself, or the subject property itself today, at $12.10, it's quite appropriately assessed at the lower end of the range, or end of the left range. So we are assessing it correctly. There is a non-arm's, in my opinion, a non-arm's length tendency as they manage the building, and that contract rent at $11 seems quite low, considering that this would most likely be some degree of tenant fit up to expand into those spaces. And then as well as you see the rest of the performance within the building, they're not at $11. With that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dupont. Questions of Mr. Paul?
No, the square footage, the rent roll shows 7,000 something, and you show 9,016. So would you agree that your area is wrong?
No, that area is what we have. That would have been done through an inspection. My question is Lakeview Management, did they expand into those unit numbers?
Well, that's a good question. Do you have any proof that they did expand there?
Well, we have the CRU that were in place. This wasn't a question that was brought up at the if I remember correctly, at the realty side of it. I don't believe Nathan Cooper referenced that there was any area dispute on this bid. There should have been at that point in time.
No, your page 7, you show a rent roll that shows 7314 square feet.
That is the rent roll. Yes, that is.
And your square footage is 1702 square feet larger. You agree with that?
Yeah, numerically, yeah.
Yeah. So the spaces beside it are 1100 square feet or 3200 square feet. They're not 1700.
Again, I don't know if they expanded in through this. Was there any expansion for this? I'm asking. Like we were through this building with Mr. Slaughter. Like I was with this building with Mr. Slaughter. This never came up when we were there at inspection. So,
did you measure all the units when you inspected?
Again, Mr. DuPont, Rob Slaughter didn't bring this up to me when we were walking through the building. If there was any issues that Altus had at that point in time, they were right there. This is only coming out of appeal because it's on a rental and we see the area is different from what they're showing us. My question is, when we put this property in, given that it's Lakeview Management, did they not get back to us through themselves or their agency? I mean, we were in their building inspecting any issues.
So your defense is that you didn't know about it, and therefore, whatever you had before, it should be the right square footage. Is that what you're saying?
Let me phrase it correctly. I asked to see this building with Rod. Rod granted it, no problem. As you can see from the numerical information we're getting back, it was way out of whack. And lo and behold, they were renovating the building, and they were doing what they're doing within the building. We are there at that point in time. If Altus, Rod, didn't know or wasn't aware or knew of any issues, that's the time to bring it up. And he didn't. So you guys would have prepared your briefs ahead of time. You guys would have known any issues and nothing. So the assessor's done everything he can at this point.
Don't you rely on rent rolls to start with to establish your square footage? And rent rolls change over time.
That's right. And that was my whole point. Was there any issue with Lakeview Management raising this to yourselves, saying, hey, we're assessed at this, we would have flowed through Rod, we're in the building, and I wasn't raised. So there's nothing more that I can do. I can't tell you whether that's 916 or 7,314. I can tell you that the manager of Altus walked through with me and there was no issue. So
do you have a copy of the realty brief that Altus put for the realty?
No, in this particular case, I didn't. I usually do put them in, but like I said, it was Nathan Cooper who presented this for me. I was sick on this day, and usually I would have a version of your guys' brief, and I would put it in the guys' see the briefs today. But this one I didn't get a chance to because it wasn't. So no, I don't have access.
So the rent that you had from the your study of page 18, I believe.
Yeah.
And then it says 185 Carlton. Asking rent was $12. Is that correct?
The asking rent for 185. No, you're reading it from the last one. You should be reading it from 2020, which I already referenced 2018, 2019, 2020. If you look on page 19, it was 85 Carlton. They were asking again $12.50 in 2018. In 2019, they're asking $13. Then 2020, they're asking $13. So they're asking $13 at the reference date. And if you look at the actual rent roll in place, you can see that they're achieving 15, 15. Then they have 1250, 11, and then they have 1250, 16, and then $11 here for the subject. You can just go down the rent roll and read it. So
page 6. Sorry.
Page 7 of my brief.
Yeah, page 7.
And okay, just to be clear, the ticketed rent on the right-hand side, which is their expected rent, their own valuation, it's all at $13 for the office rents. And then again, like I indicated on the main floor, it's a little higher rent because it's mainly retail on the main floor.
Your page 6. the total rent that you had for your valuation is 1,062,000, and you divide your square footage. I believe that rent comes to 1183 per square foot. So you value the whole building at 1183.
For as far as the whole building, again, basement leases in place, substandard basement finish in place, and some we have a few pins in there that are higher than, given that they're retail, or restaurant, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, numerically, it was 1,602,586 divided by the area, which gives you roughly that.
You mentioned averages for other properties, and this one is below average. So would you agree that if we go site specific, we should go with actual rents that we have in a subject property?
No, what I'm telling you is we reviewed this, and as you can see, the values that are in here are appropriate at $12.10 or at about $12. You're literally at a 5% marketplace. So you're outside of marketplace. You've already been discounted at a lower enough rate. If you go back to the actual, you can do it on my study, or you can do it on the 3 pages, the hard copies from the Johnson report that I put in. I believe yours is the lowest, or I should say 175, 185 Carlton is the lowest OFB asking rate in the city, with the exception of 433 Main, which is again a pretty low building there, quality building there. So overall, you're at the lower end of the range. We put you at the lower end of the range. We put you $1 under what you're asking, and right where you're performing. So
now the subject has a lot of vacancies.
Yeah.
So that since it has that much vacancy, would you not agree they should not be at the same rents as other properties that have less vacancy, or finding it easier to rent?
That's why we put them at a lower rent. That's why they're assessed at a lower rent. The vacancy ties in with this. That's why I asked to see the building when, it was my inquiry just to see it, because as you see in the performance from the OFB study, if you look at the subject, which is on the last page of this, or page 8 of the study, second last page of the brief, you see the performance of the building, the high vacancy, chronic. You see the shortfall go out of whack. You see the non-recoverables just go out of whack, and right away that triggers red flags to the point where I got to come for a visit. And sure enough, they were renovating the building and converting some of it over to better handle the chronic vacancy that was in place. So at that point, it's already been addressed. We feel it's properly addressed. We see that the rent that we put in here is appropriate given the subject property's performance, even with the tenanted CRUs, and the asking rates. We don't see them asking 11. So
that's all questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
I do not have any additional questions. Thank you.
Mr. Merritt?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have just the odd one. Mr. Pohl, according to your records, because you're just your square footage is 9,016 square feet.
yes.
Yeah, and where might you obtain that information from? Rent roll or something like that?
We usually rent roll, or if they're putting a bid in, we'll go out with an inspector.
So it's always been, Mr. Pohl, it's always been that square footage?
I have, as far back as I've looked, let me be clear. When we go out and we put a bid in, we go and inspect it. They're supposed to be referencing the rent roll, and then they talk to the actual business owner or whoever that's been held out to be and confirm the areas. So for this to be out of whack, and then have an inspection with Rod and have both pending BA and realty appeals and not be mentioned by Rod, I find it a little peculiar. Having said that, and I'm trying to be fair here, if it is out of whack, I don't see a signed document from Lakeview or from the property owners stating that. We're clear that we're at appeal. It's been an issue that could have been brought in today, and it wasn't. And if that is indeed the case, you can take a 311 inquiry out, say the areas are wrong, we can come up and confirm it, and we can adjust the rule at that point if it is indeed incorrect. I don't like deviating from information that we would have verified firsthand. CRUs change, CRUs get expanded into, it's commonplace, and when we're at appeal and I'm in the building, and if there's an issue, I would expect that it would be raised at that point. So.
All right. So according to all the information that was available to you, that is the square footage.
Yes.
All right. I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. You referenced doing a walkthrough of this property with Mr. Slaughter. When was that done?
When I was doing the study, don't quote me on this. There was no snow on the ground.
2022 sometime, or
it was in 2022 out of August, September-ish. Don't quote me on it, but I did walk through it with Mr. Slaughter. We met him there with the representative.
It's within the past year, though, is what?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now, as I look at the rent roll, it looks to me as though there are 4 discrete CRUs or 4 discrete areas, 3 of which are vacant, and the 4th of which, 602, is Lakeview Management. Is that your recollection of the walkthrough as well, or do you have an independent recollection of the 6th floor?
We didn't go through every single floor. We went through the vacant spaces. We didn't get access to the 175 portion of the building because it was being converted, and I take it at Rod's will, at his word. We were walking through it also with the representative from the property owner. We walked through the main floor to get a feel if it was going to be realty or not. We walked through the 2nd floor. There was some issues with it's on the skywalk. There was some issues with security and such. We walked through one of the large spaces that were chronically vacant that it was being converted over. You can tell there's a tenant going in. They were putting up partition walls in. And I believe we walked through one other main space. We didn't get up to main Lakeview's space because the space that we did go through would have been typical for the rest of the building. So if you look at it from a building's perspective, main floor is retail restaurant, then 2nd floor up is office, and then they're carving out 175 Hargrave, looks to be all multifamily. So I saw everything we needed. Rod saw everything we needed. He didn't mention anything with Lakeview being in a difference in square footage. Because at that point, I sent an inspector out. We don't really have to do this at appeal if it is a square foot area difference. In this case here, it would be over 1,000 square feet on 7,000. So yeah, it's pretty significant for that. But no, there was no issue. So that's why it's just a bit of a surprise because we were there.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have anything further. Mr. DuPont, your presentation, please.
Okay, to start, I can give you verbal information is that the 2021 rent roll is also 7,300. It did not change. The 2016, 2017 rent rolls were 8,364. They were not 9,000. So that if the assessors got 9,000, it comes from previous to that. There was a settlement that the municipal board for 2020, and Altus was using 8,364 square footage on the rent roll at the time, and it was settled for municipal board. I believe Jeremy should have looked at the rent roll and our brief, the realty, before coming to this board to decide what the square footage was. And now he's not even agreeing to it. So anyways, to my brief. So the first page, it's only one page. Sorry, so 1 to 2. I use the area of 7,314 square feet, $11 per square foot. So we dispute the rent in the rentable area. The first half shows what the assessor has. And then in blue on the right-hand side, we have the remarks of the 2023 reduced by board revision at Alta's value, except for 3% expenses. So Alta's rent at the board revision for the realty was $11 per square foot, 7314 square feet. The contract rent on the rent roll is exactly the same, May 20th to May 21st. So therefore, our value is this. And the page 2 is the online assessment. Then page 3 is the board revision order, what it says on the page 4 is based on the evidence presented by the applicant. And then page 5 is this excerpts of our brief at the board of revision. We have the maps and etc. And page 7 is the rent roll. And the Lakeview management shown there is 602, 7314 square feet, $11. So that was Alta's brief, and the board of revision agreed with that. Then the rest is part of the brief. Then page 10 is the rent roll, which Jeremy also had. So page 10 of our brief shows the rent roll, shows 7314 square feet. So the 2021 rent roll also shows 7314. So it has not increased. There's no evidence that they increase, or there's no evidence that it's even close to 9,016. There's no evidence here today whatsoever that would support 9,016. So the rent is certainly at 7314 square foot. And Lakeview management pays actually $11. And so that's my brief. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Pohl, questions?
Yes, I do. You're aware coming into the hearing that there was an issue with this CRU size. Did you contact the assessor leading up to the hearing?
No, I didn't think it was worthwhile to talk to you before. I had to finish my report, so I was doing that in the last minute.
You didn't feel it necessary, in your opinion, to find an error and not bring it up to the assessor before coming into the hearing, which I got your briefs late yesterday.
I put in my brief a half hour late. So at the end of the day, if you stop working, the briefs will have come. You were not working at the time.
Did you confirm with Mr. Slaughter, who handled the municipal board appeal with me? And I'm not going to get into without prejudice information that included within that order itself, or I should say with that certificate agreement itself with the municipal board. But did you actually see the rental rates that we used in the areas?
Oh, for the 2020 settlement?
You indicated I'm differentiating between, but did you have to review with Rod or yourself privately before you came to hearing and stated that?
No, I'm just saying that the brief that we presented for the municipal board was 8364, which is the amount on the rent roll for 2017 and 2016. That was a reference date. We use the square footage as of the reference date.
Let me rephrase it a different way. Are you aware that me and Mr. Slaughter reached a settlement by a simplified certificate of agreement for the municipal board?
Yeah, it was a settlement.
Are
Yeah.
you aware of the rental rate that we used?
No, the settlement does not go into details.
All right, so you didn't review that information. All right, main question, is Lakeview Management truly an arm's length tenant? They manage the building for the property owner, correct?
The owner and the Lakeview Management are not the same entity. They are arm's length.
But they manage it for the owner.
They have a relationship as a manager, yes. But they're not the same tenant.
Is there any discounting in rent for them doing that work for them?
You can speculate that there is, but it's not made clear that it's $2 discount or $1 discount. They don't say that. That's the rent that they pay. That's the rent we put for a realty at the board of revision. That's the rent that the board of revision agreed to.
Given the issue with questionable arm's length tenancy and the areas, did you get a sworn statement from Lakeview Management or the property owners as to the issues here today?
No, I don't need sworn statements, and I think it's an overreach on your part to think that for square footage dispute, the assessor has the wrong square footage, that we should get a sworn statement from the tenant. You should go with the rent rolls. You see the error, you should agree to that. It's very simple. If you can't see the error, that's your problem.
Did you bring the area issue up with Mr. Slaughter and asked if you
No.
raised it with myself?
No, I did not.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
I have a question with respect to the square footage again. I now have three numbers in front of me. I've got the 9,016 square feet as used by the city. I have the 7,314 square feet as used by Altus and you, Mr. DuPont. And you also referenced the number of 8,364 square feet that was used in the 2018. Where did that number come from?
It comes from the 2016 and 2017 rent roll. So at that time, Lakeview was renting 83.64, and then later on for the 2020 rent roll, they reduced the size to 73.14. So rent rolls change, and so therefore with the proper rent roll to rely upon is the 2020 rent roll. I'm just saying that I went back to see what it used to be, to see if it was 9,016. It was not 9,016. It was 8364 at one time, and the current year evaluation is 7314.
Okay, I missed that earlier, so thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
Any need of summary, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll just.
Mr. Paul?
Yes, please. I'll just keep it short. This property is in flux. They're addressing long-term chronic vacancy. The 15-1 we reached was not that I'm going to get into the parameters of the 15-1 or the Mr. Board appeal that we reached as well. That was taken into account, renovation of the building, restoration of the building, and where the building is going ahead. There was also a sale. We referenced all things, and when we reviewed the information, we looked at it from multiple different ways. The reduction is based on what someone would have to purchase in that point in time and invest and move forward. It's a very unique situation right now. You usually don't have to convert a portion of an OFB over to something else. And that's what we were looking at. So the reduction that we had, agreement reached, was based on that. What we're looking at here is simply what it's renting for. And what we know is what we have it on rent was not brought up any errors in the area when we went through the billing with Mr. Slaughter. We know that the agent here today did not contact the assessor to review and see if there is an error. And we have no information from either tenant or property owner, the nature of the relationship as far as rent, or the areas to be confirmed that they were indeed incorrect. So at that point, we can reference the rent roll and see how the rest of the building's performing. We can see how the rest of the marketplace is performing above where this one is, and we make the rationalization that we put the rent at around the $12 rate, which is significantly under market, is appropriate given the conditions within the building itself. So with that, I'll leave it at your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DuPont, summary?
Yes, I don't think there should be any consideration as to whether I contacted Jeremy before or not. I assume that he could read rent rolls on his own, and I assume he can look at the facts and come up to a proper conclusion as to the square footage on his own. What am I prodding him? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll conclude this matter. Before we begin the next matter, just given the tone of some of the questions that were asked and some of the statements that were made, I would ask all parties to remember that we will be dealing with each other with respect, please. Thank you. Moving to the next matter then, 360 Portage Avenue, number 2 on the list. Any preliminary matters? Mr. Pohl, Mr. DuPont?
I don't know. I have to pull
Okay.
the file up. I haven't seen it yet, so there was a few properties I asked for confirmation. I don't know if this is one of them or not.
I did not have this one as one for confirmation, but
Okay, if it's not for confirmation, I don't have
Okay.
any issues.
okay, then Mr. Poole, would you lead us through your presentation, please?
You are mute, Jeremy.
I think you're muted, Mr. Poole.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's weird.
Better? All right.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
File number 224352. Business assessment ID number is 25179. We have a ARV or annual rental value of 292,560. The total area is 8,592 square feet. The overall ARV is $34.05. It is Royal Bank Canada. Below, we see a base rent of $31.55. The occupancy costs are to the right of that. We see the lease in place. The contract rent is $30.34. It is a arm's length tenancy. I reviewed this property in full with Mr. Slaughter. We've had it under appeal. The order is below for the realty side of it. We see that the board did decrease it, and the assessor provided the information they did, as well as the applicant, which was broad, and the decision was based on the applicant. So before we get into any further than that, kind of go through the building itself, just so the board's filled in. This is for the hydro building. They have some tenanted spaces within the hydro building. This is one of them. It's a bank space. So I don't necessarily have to go through all the details of the hydro building. It is world class. It's been stated that is one of the best in the world, the most efficient building in the world, and significant building to own, the best in Canada. Yada yada yada. It's one word after word. I'm not going to go through them all today. You can read through all the information you want on that. On page 9 is the bank rent rates that we had under appeal for this property, because again, this space is a bank. It's not office. There is some restaurants within the building. There's a bank as well, and obviously office tower. So the rent comparables that we used, and we had $31.55, same rent that we have here today for the space, which is on page 12. On page 13, we see photos of the property. I'm sure we've all driven by it at this point. So at this point, when we went through it all, I'll just skip ahead to the submittal that was done by Mr. Slaughter and Altus. That's on my page 19. They indicated that same comparables that they were using. They indicated that they wanted $31.04. If I'm not mistaken, he wanted $31.04. I might be wrong. There's a bit of a rounding error there, but again, $31.08 was fine with me, or $31.04, whatever the contract rent was, because that's what they indicated. And after review, about a $30 rent is appropriate given the superiority of the building. So at that point, I'm fine with using the PMI or PNMI that Altus was suggesting at $267,039 for this property. So with that, I'm fine with applying what the board did in the realty hearing. So I believe it's the same today. So
Thank you. Mr. DuPont, any questions?
You're fine with 269? I thought we were using 267.
I'm just going with what the board ordered from the realty. I reviewed the realty. The realty is reasonable. They put in a north of $30 net rent on a bank space under that building, which is completely appropriate. So what Rod submitted, as you can see, it was $31.08. But I think it might have just been a little bit of a rounding issue, because it was $267.39. So that's the PMI that they were using for the rent.
Right. Okay. So you agree to that then?
Yeah, that was the number that they were using, so. I don't know why, what number you're using, 267, 39, so you're looking at the exact same rent, right?
Right, that we had a board revision, yeah, for realty.
Okay, sorry, it sounded like you had a different rent. My mistake. So we're good on this to recommend that.
Okay, so my first page rounded to 288,540. Is that what you agreed to?
I'll trust you. I trust the math is correct on that.
Okay.
Quiet.
Okay, no questions, no further questions.
Just to clarify then, you're making a verbal recommendation, Mr. Pohl, for the ARV to be $288,519?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to be clear, I haven't run those numbers myself. I'm just looking at, I'm sure they're right. So I still would appreciate the work to run the numbers to make sure that it follows the real order. I think it was just a difference of rounding of 5 cents or so, or like at that point, it really doesn't matter on $30+ So.
Okay, then we've heard Mr. DuPont's position on that. Ms. Nesbitt, any questions?
No, and I did just run the numbers, and the numbers work out to Mr. DuPont's value, 288,540.
I think we're all running them at the same time. So, Mr. Merritt, questions?
That is fine with me. Thank you.
Okay, then given what has been said, we will conclude that matter and move on to the next item on the list, number 3 at 77 Main Street. Are there any preliminary issues with respect to this matter, gentlemen?
No, not on my part.
No.
Okay, thank you. Then, Mr. Pohl, would you lead us through your presentation, please?
Just bear with me one moment. Okay. File number is 224451. Address is 77 Main Street. The business assessment ID number is 22241. The total annual rental value is $1,522,320. The total the total area is 97,140. The overall ARV is $15.67. The main, the main area, the upper is $14.02 for base rent, and the lower is $9.44 for the basement. So those are what we had in place for net rents. So the annual rental value and the occupancy costs applied are to the right of that. This property is owner occupied. On the next page is the order. I participated in this hearing. There was a decrease. They used an adjusted net operating income. I'm not sure exactly how to get back to it, because again, there was a lot of moving parts here. You could read from the order. So at this point, we're not asking non-compliance. Not asking for non-compliance here today, although it was applied the property itself for the realty side. So next page, our briefs moving forward, it starts on page 5 for realty. As you can see, the subject property is on page 6 or 2 of my brief. Comparables are the same ones that we already used. It's a Class C building. And we see that the weighted average was $13.08. Again, weighted average, meaning the average. This is a better than average building. So you'd expect that the average rate would be more than that. So on the next page, again, confirming that the rents that were in place, so at $14, about $1 more is appropriate given the standard of this building. And again, $9.44, $9 range for the lower air basement area. So the next page is Altus's brief on what they were asking for. They were asking for $8.10 for the lower area and $13.20, which equated to for the upper area or the main area and that equated to $12.25. So from that point, not exactly sure what the board applied. My view is that our rents were appropriate. The board's view was that they were not, that they made somewhat of an adjustment, but it doesn't sound like they went to Altus's number either. So that I'm open to questions.
Mr. Dupont, questions?
No questions.
Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Merritt, any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And I don't have any questions. Mr. Dupont, your presentation, please.
Yes, you see the first page that I have. So at the top of the page is the assessor's evaluation, 79,140 square feet at 1402. I'm asking for 1320 per square foot. And in blue, we're saying that the board's decision for the realty works to Altus's rents. So the remarks said that 23 realty was based on adjusted NOI and 7.25% cap rate on the income. So the stream 1 and 5% to income stream of parking. So if we work these board's numbers, it comes to 1303 for the parking and 12408 for the building. And the 12408 is what Altus had for value. So it works to Altus's rent. We can go to the numbers. So BOR building NOI was 899, 583. And the building rent comes to 1190 and minus 89,033. So the rents that Altus had works to that. There was no further appeal to the municipal board. So we asked that you put 1320 per square foot. And then that gives you a rounded ARV of 1,242,480, and we can go to the evidence now. So page 2, I got page 2 also. That's the other part, 18,000 square feet. We have the same square footage, and it works to 810 per square foot, the board revision decision. So there were two income streams there. I think, Jeremy, it's just dealing with the 79,000, but our report is for both areas. Oh, no, it's the same area, same roll number, I believe. Yeah. So the order is on page 4. So the board reduced it to 13,711,000. And on page 5, it shows how the board arrived at it. And it says based on adjusted net operating income, with cap rate 7.25 applied to income stream 1, and cap rate of 5% to the income stream 2, which is the parking. So they changed the cap rate. So that if we look at the page 6, where we estimate the board decision. So when they applied their cap rate 5%, 7.25, it gets those values 12,408, 1,303, and so that the rents that we have for the office are exactly what Altus had. So the decision shows in red at the bottom, 13,711,000. If you add the two together, it comes to that. Based on the board's cap rate. And then the next page, page 7, that was the rent that we had, the estimated board revision decision, 18,944 and 12,825. Okay. Okay, so, I gotta understand what I'm doing myself. I think we should skip to page 19. Page 17, we're asking for 810 rent, 1320. And we had 8% cap rate, and the board used 7.25, 7.25, 7.5. Now I have to check that again. Yeah, 7.25. So if you applied 7.25 to our net income on page 7, it comes to 12,408. That's the decision of the board.
If you need a minute, Mr. Dupont, we can take a short recess if you like.
Yeah, I think I need a bit of time to check this out.
Is 5 minutes enough?
Yep.
Then we'll recess for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Okay, I'll call this meeting back to order. Mr. Dupont, when we left, you were looking at the latter pages of your brief, if you would like to continue.
Yeah, I in the last few pages, it worked out all to strength, but I couldn't figure out what I did on page 7. So on page 7, there was an exercise I started. The board had reduced the rents by 89,033, and I had to decide to apply it to either the basement or the upper. And that exercise on page 7, I was putting the whole 89,000 reduction to the upper and keeping the basement at the assessor's rent to come to the value. But when I went further, I found out that the board had actually agreed with the Altus rent, so there's no need to allocate the 79,140 on page 7. I had that 12,89.5. It was had to be rounded quite a bit to get the exact numbers. But then when I went through the further exercise on page 17, the board's decision comes to Altus NOI and divide by 7.25, it comes to 12,408. So the board in fact agreed with the rents of 810 for the basement and 1320 for the upper. So that'd be my evidence that that's what the board did. It's not clear in their order, but they did reduce the rents by 89,000, and which works out the Altus rents.
Thank you. Mr. Poole, questions?
Yeah, sorry, just bear with me here. They didn't state anything other than an adjusted NOI, so reasonably we don't know whether they adjusted both or just one. We're guessing, right? In order to come up with, because they asked for overall, Altus Marcello asked for 12,223,903. Correct?
They adjusted the income on the office, not the parking. So therefore, on that, if we remove the parking value that the board had, we can go up to a value for the office, 12,408,000. And so if we adjust the Altus income for that, it comes to our rents.
I don't see that. Like I get what you're doing. You're basically freezing one rent and just playing with the other one to get it to work out the numbers way. But there's no way to really verify which CRU they changed. Right? I understand what you're doing, but ultimately, you didn't get the number you asked for, and I don't see how we can come back to that. But I mean, if you're looking at it from a whole, I guess that might be okay to freeze one. I'll leave it at the boards to figure it out, because of up on your main brief on your main page, you're stating that it was $13.20 for the main CRU, 79,140, and then you're stating that it's $810 for the 18,000 CRU, which is right. But with that, you didn't get your value that you sought. You had an adjustment to it. So maybe I'm just being lost here in the numbers, but it seems like you've tried to freeze one. This is exactly what you tried to do on page 7. You tried to freeze the bottom CRU, or the basement, I should say, at 944, and just play with the rent at $12.89 or so to come up with the value that they put in place. But we don't really know either one, right?
Well, that's why I was trying to. The board decision works to 89,000 reduction in rent, and so my first exercise was to apply it to the upper floor only. But when I did the further exercise, if you use the actual rents from Altus, we had reduced both the upper and the lower. It does come to Altus rents. So if you want to use the board's decision, you want to apply the 89,000 reduction to one area versus the other, that's fine by me, as long as it's 89,000. But then the board's decision, when they say adjusted net income, I believe they applied it to both upper and lower at Altus's rents.
Okay. So they could have left the rents in place, and then they could have changed the expense, non-recoverable expenses, or the vacancy, or like there's too many variables here that they could have done. Like I can't come back to what you're stating there, but if what you're stating, you're fine with $13.20, and then $8.10. I'll leave it at the board's hand, because ultimately it's the same CRU. What I'm getting at is the same bit, right? It just has two separate CRUs in it.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DuPont, your final figure is $1,242,480. Is that correct?
That's
No.
no. I have to add both together. 1,242,480 plus the basement 190,800.
All right. Thank you. All right. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
I do not have questions. Thank you.
Then any need of summary, gentlemen?
All right, I just want to bear with me here. I just want to make sure we're getting this right, because you asked for your OFC. If you look on your page, which was your page 18 of your Altus Group valuation, you have a PNMI for the building of 1,190,448. Then on your are you taking that base rent and then applying our occupancy costs?
Yeah, 1,190,448 in total.
Just give me 1 second here. 1,190,448 plus 7 plus. So you're looking for an ARV of 1,433,298 with a little bit of rounding, depending on. Is that not exactly what the PNMI was plus our occupancy costs?
The base rent or ARV you're talking about?
No, the total ARV.
Yeah, it's the two numbers that I have. I don't know what you're adding. If you're referring to page 19, the rent
I'm thinking just so the board's clear. I'm looking at assuming that we're just looking at what Altus asked for the rent. 1,190,448 plus our occupancy costs, which are 197,850 plus 45,000. That summates to 1,433,298. Of course, you'd have to round that up for the 12 equal payments kind of thing. So, but that is what you're seeking, correct? Because that would be what Altus asked for at the board. It sounds like you're coming up with something lower than that. Like, which number are you looking for your total ARV? Are you looking for 1,307,000, or are you looking for 1,242,000?
The DRV that I have at the bottom right for both adds up to 1,433,280. Isn't that the figure that you said using the rents from the 810 and 1320?
Yeah, no, but on your page one, like I have two ARVs. Like
the ARV on top of my page is the assessor ARV. That's what the assessment is. And it says based on information by City of Winnipeg. And then the bottom part is what Altus is asking.
Okay, can you just give me a verbal confirmation though? Because I see on page one, your estimated total revised ARV is 1,242,498.
For that income stream of the upper. And page 2, I'm adding the 18,000 square feet, 190,800. And if you add the two together, it comes to 1,433,280.
Okay, fine. Okay. All right, we're on the same page. And all right, if that's what you're stating, I'll leave it in the board's hands. It just sounded like you were seeking the 1,200,000.
Oh no, that was for the first income stream. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll conclude this matter and move on to the next matter, please. That number 4 on the docket at 123 Main Street, please.
What's the address again?
123 Main Street. You're number 4 on the list.
Bear with me here.
And I asked for confirmation on that one.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
If you could give us, yes, Mr. If you could please give us a summary, Mr. Paul.
Sure. File number 224445. Business assessment ID number is 4025. The total annual rental value is 87,240, and the total stall count is 79. we have a $92 rent assigned to it, which produces an annual net rent of $87,216. And of course, it's a parkade, so that is the ARV.
Thank you. And Mr. Dupont, you're seeking confirmation of this matter or this amount?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Nesbitt, any questions?
Yeah, just a quick question. Mr. Dupont, I noticed that you also appealed liability. Are you seeking confirmation on liability as well?
Yes, we appealed the realty for amount and liability, and so now I believe we appealed both here for the. Did we? Is there a liability in this? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Alta's position is checking whether the Fork should be paying taxes. Confirmation for both amount and liability.
Okay.
Thank you for confirming that.
Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I don't have any. Any need for summary, gentlemen?
No.
Okay, then we will conclude that matter and move on to number 5, please. This is also 123 Main Street.
I believe I had asked for confirmation also on that.
Yes, Mr. Pohl, if you would please read in your report.
Sure. File number 224446. Business assessment ID number is 33182. The owners is North Portage Development Corporation. The annual rental value is $90,600. The total area of the premise is 6,320, and we have an overall ARV of $14.34 a square foot. The base ARV rent that we have, or net rent that we had in place, was $11.84, and the occupancy costs are to the right, summating to the $90,600.
Thank you. Mr. Dupont.
No questions. Then I am asking for confirmation.
And Ms. Nesbitt, I think I can anticipate one of your questions.
And on the liability as well as the value, Mr. Dupont?
Yes, confirm vote, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Merritt, questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And I have none. We can conclude this matter and move on to item number 6 on the docket, please. That being, well, let me switch to that. 200 Main Street. Mr. Pohl.
Bear with me for one moment. I'm just catching up. We're moving a little quicker than we usually do. Okay. All right. File number is 224514. Business assessment ID number is 22439. The address is 200 Main Street. The annual rental value is $912,360. The total area is 53,004 square feet. The ARV that we have in place is $17.21. Below what we have a base ARV for the main portion at $15.06, and we have a $7.82 for the storage area for the 2540. This appropriate occupancy costs are to the right, which summate back to the $912,360. So this is not owner occupied in 200 Main Street. It's a Assiniboine Credit Union. This is the one tenant within the building. The other one was Wawanesa. Obviously, they're owner occupied. On the next page is the order. We had this under appeal. It was with Mr. Slaughter, myself. The assessment was confirmed, highlighted in yellow, and it was based on the evidence that the assessment taxation department gave. So again, that wouldn't be inclusive of the rent. We'll go over that now. On page 4 of my brief is the cover page to the realty side of it. So moving forward, on page 5, we see the photographs of the property, and on page 6, it's located about a block down from Portage in Maine. It's that next block over, or 2 blocks over, I should say. So on page 7 is the highlighted areas within the income stream, which submit to what we have on appeal today, and those are the rents that we had under question and were confirmed by the board. And as we can see, following that is the submission from income expense questionnaire from the property owner. They do it digitally, so the format's a little different. And as you can see, you can read through the rent roll. They have one tenant in their building, which is one main tenant in their building, which is Sinboyne Credit Union. They have another Handy Mart. Don't believe they're there anymore. I don't think they were at a bill anyway. So I believe it's just the Sinboyne Credit Union now. Below that is the COVID questionnaire. And then we get into the marketplace study. And again, that highlights this property as well. So again, I encourage you to read the first 2 pages of the commentary. On the next page, we already touched on it, but we'll touch on again. Page 4 of the study, or 15 of the brief. We see that for 2020, $14.84 is the weighted average. Stabilized out, it's $14.39. Again, global weighted average. The graph shows below hand. That's what you'd expect to be at about an average OFB. This is greater than an average OFB, as you can see from the property, the newer build. It's a bank space on the main floor. It's Wawanesa above, and then obviously credit union as well. So your 2 primary tenants are better than. It's better than average, but we don't have it. We don't have it too far off of where the 2020 value was of $14.84. We have it just a hair above that. So it's pretty fairly assessed. I wouldn't call it a OFB prime, but I wouldn't call it just an average either. It's kind of in between. And it's appropriately assessed at where it came in at. So from the next points, we can see that they are on page, bear with me, here we go. Page 17 or 6 of the study, second down, 200 Main Street. And these are the rents that they're in place for. So the one question that really comes up to mind is the way they report. Their CRU fluctuates a little bit in the reporting. The rental rates go up and down a little bit based on how they're reporting, but generally speaking, that's what they were getting at. But again, this is a long-term lease. They've been long-term tenants within the building. So these are step-ups that are inclusive in that lease. And we're being reflective of that in the study. So you're not going to find them in the Johnson report because although they show it in the Johnson report, if you go down to starting on page 8, they show it as 100% occupied every year that he's looked at. So they don't report shortfall. They don't report vacancy other than at 0. Mainly owner occupied with 1 tenant, but they don't report any rents or asking rents because that's what Johnson report is, advertised reflection of advertisement in the marketplace. They just categorize it on their Johnson report. But given that there's no vacancy in this building for back the years that were covered, you're not going to see an asking rate because there wasn't a tenants. So from that point, I feel that where we put them in at just over $15 is reasonable, given the fact that we have $14.84 for the 2020 year to stabilize that out over 3 years, a little bit under. And the condition of the building being a newer build, relatively newer build compared to the populace of the other OFBs, that's a fair assessment. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dupont. Questions?
You didn't show all this brief there again?
I didn't have access to it. I should have, but I mean, I typically do, but don't show it. No.
I dispute the area only. So could you go to the rent rolls and show me where you got your area?
The areas are on my page 9. I believe Rod brought this up in the hearing, stretching my mind's eye that there was a bit of a difference. But the rents that, or the areas that we had in place were based on what they were reporting to us. So bear with me here. So if you go to my page 9. So very obviously it's just an Winnipeg Credit Union. Is there any other question regarding that?
No. It's all questions.
Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
Yes, since we're on the issue of square feet, I see very clearly unit number 108 is 2540. So that matches the storage unit that's Mr. Pohl is using. So what do the others add up to, other than me getting out my calculator and doing that?
I'm doing it at the moment, but like I was trying to point out,
Yeah.
even when I went through the rent roll and I took the reported rents, there was a little bit of fluctuation in the reported rent.
Okay.
So, you got to take everything with a grain of salt when we're looking at it. So bear with me here while I add them up if that's what the board's asking. I'm coming up with 59,408.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're even over what they're reporting, and that's what I'm trying to.
Pardon me. Yeah, the reporting is more than what you're using, right? Because that doesn't include the 2540, the 59,408.
Yeah, no, that didn't. So you add 2540 onto it, it's even greater than that.
Right.
So that's and that's why I'm kind of. You have to take it with a grain of salt. Like when I'm doing my study, I'm going with what they're actually reporting. I'm checking for errors, and if you look at my study on page 6 of the study, or page 17 of the brief, 200 Main Street, we have 61,498. Then we have 61,498, and then they only report 50,640, and then 50,640, where the areas go. And as you see here, so
yeah, and the 59,408 and the 2540 is that 61,498, right?
Yeah, and just so we're clear, when we're going through difference, and that's what I was getting for the reporting when you do the overall average for these, some of those rental rates change based on how they were filling them out. We see how they digitally entered it in, and they fluctuated a little bit. Typically they wouldn't. So the areas fluctuated a little bit. They had a difference of reporting. As you can see, from 2016-17, they reported 1 CRU, meaning the whole populace, but they occupied in the building. Obviously there's more areas within it. And then they reported 4 for 2019, 2020. So we're only as good as what's being held out to us. And I can only review what's been held out to us. So I got to take it as fact, but at the same time, it kind of, looked at a little bit of grain of salt there. So with that, I think we're more than appropriately assessed. And again, the area that we have, and as I want to highlight to the panel today, before we put them in, we send an inspector out. We confirm, like we actually ask, what are you in here for? And that's where we get our firsthand information from. So if later on in INEs that are being submitted, they may have changed, meaning maybe they took out a CRU and they are actually not in it. But unless they report it to us, take it a 311 inquiry, we changed our area, please vacate us out of this much a square foot. That's going to remain. We'll review the rent rolls. If we catch something, we'll look at it. But I mean, there's over 12,000 commercial properties in the building or in the city that we look through. If there's small areas of changes and they don't notify us, it becomes problematic.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pohl. I have no other questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Merrick, questions?
I think my questions have been answered, Mr. Chairman. Thank you kindly.
I was struggling with the square footage as well, but I think I'm a little bit clearer on it now. Mr. Dupont, your presentation, please.
Actually, I'd like to redirect from that. My evidence shows that the units 102 and 103 ceased to be rented by a Assiniboine credit union, and I believe that's why your square footage went down less than the rent rolls. Could you confirm that that your square footages exclude 102, 103? Do you have any data that shows that?
No, like I have, like I've already indicated here, if there was any errors in the rent roll, please let us know. Take out a 311 inquiry. We'll send an inspector out. It's tough to do it on a business assessment appeal. I got information from the day before. But what we have under appeal was deemed to be correct. I believe there was a small area issue that Mr. Slaughter brought up for this hearing, but the board ordered that the areas were correct and we're applying them here today. So if there's any follow-up by the owner or the agent for the owner via 311 and taking out an inquiry in that aspect, I think that's the proper way to go through it. But at appeal here today, I can't confirm anything other than what we have on file.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if on file your ID 16959 states it as the unit numbers, that 50,464 equals the suite numbers, unit numbers. Do you have any evidence to that effect? Do you know what you're adding in that 50,464?
I didn't see a reason to go through what we have. I don't have access to that to do for an appeal. Like I said, I got only a few business hours to work on this. If there was an error, an outrageous error or anything like that, it could have been addressed earlier. I can't even remember what the small area differences that Rod brought up, but the best way to handle it would have been via 311 and contact our department. But I mean, I can't do that deal here today.
So you page 1. If you exclude the first two, 9784 and 1518, if you add the next 4, I believe that comes to 50,646. Could you do the maths there?
If that's what your take is, why are you asking me to do the math now under appeal on cross-examination? If there was an error,
I know where the error is, and I'm saying that if you add these 4 tenants, it comes to 50,646, and you have 50,464. So I believe you just inverted some numbers there.
Let me rephrase it a different way. Did they vacate space?
Yes, they vacated 9784 and 1518.
Did your property owner, business owner or the property owner contact the department and indicate that it's Assiniboine credit vacated space and at what date and what size?
Yes, you got that. Your 50,464 excludes the 9784 and the 1518.
Yeah, but you're contesting a different area.
Yeah. I'm saying that the to start with, the rent roll that you have for 2020 included these 2 tenants. Your business assessment removed those 2 tenants because they went from Assiniboine to Wawanesa. And the error lies in the next 4 tenants. The next 4 adds up to 50,646, and you have 50,464. So there's a little error there from using the inverting the numbers, and you counted 2540 twice, and that's the difference that you had with Rod at the Board of Revision. So I can go through that my own evidence also, but I'm just pointing that out. Your own numbers on page 1 indicate that you did not assess 9784 and 1518. The error.
Henry. Just to be clear, this is going back a number of months for this hearing, the realty. I remember there was some issue with the area. The board confirmed it. Altus is aware and the owner is aware to take out a 311 and say, hey, there's an error here. Please come inspect the property. This wouldn't be coming up again because I'd have that flag. We would have that information. Did that happen after the hearing date for this realty side of it? Or was the change prior to the release of the rule? And then there was a mistake made, possibly. But did you follow up with it from an agency perspective or from the owner or the tenant?
I just used the rent roll that we had for the Board of Revision.
I would suggest if there is any error and there was two CRUs of significant space, to follow up with 311 and rebuild. We can't do this for business assessment one day ahead of it's not possible. So from that,
I know, but we're dealing with the board here, and we should not be dealing with 311. So 311 has nothing to do with this here today.
Unless your professional agent hired, if there is an error and we know of it, shoot us an email well in advance of the hearing.
And if we did not, you're saying the board cannot correct it?
I'm thinking we're getting a little bit further afield here. This was supposed to be a redirect, Mr. DuPont. I think we've established that you have a difference of a difference in your mathematical calculations with respect to the rent. Perhaps what we can get you to do is move on to your presentation where you outline where that difference in rent lies and answer questions on that, and then leave it to the board to make their determination.
Okay, that's fine.
Then I would ask you to make your presentation for us, please, Mr. DuPont.
Okay, so my page 1, the assessor's got 50,464, and we have 48,106. And it shows in red at the bottom right, the difference is 2358 square feet. Now, I believe the assessors 50,464, and it's actually 50,646. There was a bit of an inversion number there. That's $182 difference, and they counted the 2540 twice. And if you take 2540 minus the 182 from inversion, it comes to 2358. So that's where the error occurred that the assessor has. They counted the 2540 twice, plus another error on the inversion of the numbers. So on the bottom right of the page 1 in blue, it says vacated by ACU, Center Point Credit Union, and occupied by Wawanesa on the 2021 IE are units 102 and 103. We have that questionnaire. And it shows that those two square footage units are now occupied by Wawanesa. That itself is not in dispute per se, because the assessor is not assessing those two properties today for business assessment. The difference in rentable area is the fact that the 2540 square feet is counted twice by the assessors. Our page 2, the 2540 is shown also. So we don't dispute the rents, we just dispute the square footage. So the occupied area is 106, 201, 601. It comes up to 48, 106. So that we apply that, and the assessors rent 1506, and the occupancy costs. So our value, ARB, comes 844,740 versus the assessor 886140. So it's not much difference. It comes to the difference in area of 2358. And that's the difference in area we had for the Board of Revision Realty. And I can go to that now. So page 2 is we don't dispute that part, the 2540 at 782 that the assessors rent have. We don't dispute that at all. So that part we don't dispute. Page 3 shows the assessors online, which matches the assessor today. Board of Revision confirmed the assessment. And then we have the 2020 rent roll, page 6, starting page 6. Page 7 is the areas that we show. So 102 and 103 are shown there. That's the areas they vacated and reoccupied by Wawanesa, and the assessor has removed those, so that's not in dispute. So now they occupy 39172540 and 32278 and 11911. And the assessor counted the 2540 twice. Then the page 10, I have to rotate that page. That's a 21 rent roll is the next up for that. Then it shows 102 and 103 now occupied by Wawanesa. So that the assessor properly reflects the fact that those 2 units are gone. They showed on the 2020 realty questionnaires, but they were removed, and the city has caught that. And I should have shown the board revision report that Altus had. I didn't, but it was 48,106 that we had as square footage, and that's the difference that Jeremy remembers from the realty. And that's my submission.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Questions?
Yeah. First of all, the 2021 INE is post preference, right?
Oh, I realize that, but
Okay.
I'm just trying to explain things. No. You do not assess those 2. You show it for 2020 realty. It would be confusing to the board for them not to know that these 2 units are not assessed by the assessor now.
Mr. DuPont, I'm trying to address this. So
Okay, but
so the rental rate, you're not issuing it. We're good with rental rate. We're just coming down to the area. I realize back at appeal, Rod mentioned in his brief, there was a small difference of area. Why wouldn't, at that point again, rather than doing an appeal, you just send a 311 and say, hey, you're off by this much. We'd send an inspector out, we correct it. At that point, you get the chance to appeal it if we change the assessment or not. We're back at the business assessment appeal, essentially redoing the same thing again, which was already confirmed. The area was part of it that was confirmed. So I'm not looking from an assessment point of view, from my assessor point of view, to look past a post-reference document to correct something that may or may not be right. That's where the triggering from the ownership group needs to, or the tenancy or the agent needs to send a 311 and say, hey, your difference of area. It's not appropriate to be doing an appeal. That's the whole reason why we sent out an inspector.
You can send inspectors, you can check with 311. It's not up to us to say, come inspect. It's not up to us to call 311 every time we find a potential discrepancy. I know I spent sometimes hours and hours trying to go over rent rolls with the assessor because they were trying to establish the actual areas of business assessment. And it's not my job. My job is to do the appeals. It's not to correct the business assessment, that the inputs. You get your own data. It's not up to us to report to 311. We don't deal with 311.
Let me rephrase it a different way. Outside of the agent's perspective, the agent's role in this, did the property owner or the tenant report to the assessment department that there was a known error that was made to them by Altus? And you caught an error here. Please let the department know you made an error and get him to come out.
No, that error shows on the rent rolls. Your areas are higher than the rent roll. The rent roll has 48,106, and you put 50,240 or whatever it is. So that you did not listen to the rent roll. So the rent roll the owner gave you the correct information. If the owner's information was incorrect, then I would contact you and say, we have to revise our numbers because there was an error at what we reported you. But there was never any error that was reported by the owner. It's just the assessor added 2540 twice.
Okay. That's the only questions I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Merritt, questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Any need of a summary, gentlemen?
No.
Then we will. Then we'll turn to item number 7 on the docket, please. That being 333 Main Street. Any preliminary matters to deal with?
I don't believe so on my part.
No, there's not.
Then, Mr. Pohl, would you lead us through your report, please?
Sure. Bear with me one moment while I get it up. File number 224186. Address is 333 Main Street. The business assessment ID is 54284. I apologize, I'm getting over a bit of a cold. Walwin Multiple Mutual Insurance Company is the tenant. The total annual rental value is for $988,540. We see the area is for 53,752 square feet, and the Airbnb is $18.39. We have a $15.89 net rent that was applied to the property or base rent, and then occupancy costs are to the right of that, which gets you back to the Airbnb. Moving on from that, we had this under appeal. I had this under appeal with Mr. Slaughter. We did the whole Portage and Main in 3 long days. This was one of the properties that were under appeal. There was a decrease. The main rationale from this was that this property had substantial NOIs greater than what we modeled. It was well performing for years, 6 years leading up to it, and hovering just at the reference date. Again, outside of the 2020 INE, because they went to the 2021. There was a vacancy which occurred in the building, and one needs to move in to take up some of the area. Principally, I disagreed with the reduction strongly. We'll get to some of the rationale and hearing as we go along in this appeal as we go along. But basically, it was, hey, let's not look at what happened in the past, how stable it was for as long back as you want to look, but let's look right at the 90 days, right up to the window, and there's a big vacancy. Scary, and there was a reduction made based on that. So the next page highlights that. The decision is based on the applicant, obviously Mr. Slaughter's work. So we'll go through that now. On page 4, which is the cover page of my brief, as you can see, we were seeking $31,320,000. As we see from the next page, it's what Artist Reed calls the MTS Building 1 and 2. They classify it as Class A. As you can see highlighted, Class A. I look at it as a B prime, strong B prime, very strong B prime. But again, they deem it an A. Pictures are as on the next page. Buildings 1 and 2 are operated together. There's a causeway between the 2 buildings. As you look through the building itself, this is straight from Artist's website. It's a good synopsis of what the building is. We've all seen it. You've been down Portage and Main. We see that the basic rent that we're being sought for was $16. They were seeking that in 2019. Obviously, they knew some vacancy was coming, and they were advertising. So the next page is moving forward. Again, we see that they're asking $16 on page 11, 2018-19, and moving forward. These are just the pictures of the property and location advertising. Then in Q of 2021, after reviewing, there was some vacancy which occurred within the building, 53,078 square feet. In the building that was primarily non-vacant, or 100% occupied, I should say. The asking rent again for multiple listings was $16. Pretty well documented. The COVID reports and the INEs are starting on page 21. Everyone hear me?
Mr. Mayor, are
I
you,
think we lost you, Ron.
Mr. Mayor, are you still with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Sorry, disappeared from the screen. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Paul. If you can continue, please.
Okay,
It's okay.
sorry.
I saw the nice picture behind you. I usually don't get to see the full view of it. You're always in front. Okay, so
Thank you.
page 21 starts the COVID report. And then from that point, highlighting this on page 24, we see the NOIs, the actual rents that are being achieved, the NOIs, the amortization highlighted. That is much stronger than what we modeled. And it was like that for significant periods of time, well past the study that we've looked at. I've highlighted here what the rents were in place, $17.55, again, greater. On page 26. And then again, $17.89, so highlighted in yellow for your convenience. They have one rent in place here, which is Altus uses a lot, which I questioned Mr. Slaughter on. It's highlighted in red. It's $6. It's in the $6 range. Clearly, there's something going on there. You don't get downtown Class A buildings at $6. It should never be used in any kind of summation whatsoever. So again, remove that. When you look at what they're indicated on page 31, again, they had about 13,000 square feet vacant and 168,000 building, virtually no vacancy. And they knew a space was coming up, and obviously more money's took advantage of that. So on our next page is the rents that were in place at $15.89. That's the one we have under appeal here today. Essentially, they were advertising for the longest time at $16. You can see that the achieve rates in the building for long back as I've looked were greater than $16. The NOIs in the building were stronger than what we modeled. It was a good building all around up until one of the main tenants left. And then let's forget about the performance of the building. Let's look at it right on the reference date and have blinders to the history of the building. And Altus was awarded a reduction based on their analysis. I disagree with it. I'm going to have to go into a little bit more in full, and I'll let the board make whatever decision they want to make. So again, page 1 and 2 of the studies comes on page 33 and 34 and 35. Please read through it at your leisure. Getting on to the average, we see that the average was $14.84 for 2020 for an average B, $14.39 stabilized. Again, this is a deemed by artist Class A. I say it's a strong B prime, but either way, the numbers are what they're numerically working out at and what they was rented for. So when we see that a $16 range is more appropriate, we see that they are at the, and again, I've looked at this property leading up to the reference date, not going past the reference date 2021 INE, obviously, but leading up to it, it is still in the one standard deviation. It's just at the positive end of it and going on to the second. It's well within statistically accurate for the marketplace and appropriately so at $16 or $15.89, about $16. And that's exactly what they're advertising. For years and years and years, they got greater than that. So when we go to the actual property itself, which is on my page 7 of my study, page 39 of my brief, we see the performance of the building. We only see one 2016 renewal at $17.55 for the entire building because that's what it was net. And you can, moving backwards in time, you could see the 4% vacancy that was in the building. And I believe it grew to 8% in 2020. And then you had the large tenant leave, obviously, Bell and TS left. So at that point, we see that it is a good building. So next, when we look at it, obviously, I indicated on the study, I don't look at those reference information. I have and I'll just touch base on it just so we're clear. Exclusion of the partial 2021 year, and I'll read it verbatim. The delivery of the 2023 property assessment rule is June 3rd, 2020. And this date did not allow for the inclusion of other income and expense data for the partial 2021 year, which is just January to March of that year, as it's not available to the assessor until May 5th, 2022. And further time would be needed to properly review and include any return data, analyze and look at it. As well, this 3-month block of data has limited availability and utility within the marketplace approaching April 1st, 2021, the reference date, as opposed to the established prior 36 months, which is what I've been using for stabilizing the marketplace out. Furthermore, directive guidance from the school board also indicates that a complete year or years of income and expense items in relation to each other should be examined. Given the rationale above, the assessor has not examined nor included the 2021 year for the OFA or OFB studies. Now, below that is a quote from Municipal Board A, Order A 18478. Generally, this was the multifamily appeal. The board agrees that an expense item, whether fixed or variable, cannot be isolated when valuing a property for assessment purposes. The board is not willing to vary from the common practice of establishing a 2009 income and expenses to establish a base for the stabilization at the reference date. Ultimately, what this was, and I believe Representative Moulds here today had a role in it, was the grabbing of the taxes in the future year and pulling it back to the current year. Ultimately, it was deemed that was post-reference. You shouldn't be doing that. But what this order really speaks to in great detail is, please look at every year in isolation to itself. If you're going to jump to the next year for taxes and they're greater, then you should jump to the next year's rent, and then the call comes undone. So rather than doing that, look at every year individually. That's what I did in the study. Everything's in linear respect to each year. All the rents, all the vacancies, all the shortfall and non-recoverables, everything's done that way. So in this case here, at appeal, and I'll get onto it now, the focus from Altus, starting on page 42, was ultimately, don't look at the back way it was performing, because that's money not coming to you. Please just look at the vacancy at the time, COVID, all the rest of it. So, and then this was the rent that came up, and you can see from their work up on page 44, they've included the Wawanesa rent at $14. And then when you look at the agreement in place, Rod actually provided a lease agreement. I didn't ask for it, it was provided. And we see as we read through it for the premise, the space that MTS left, we see that, where was it here? On page 48, page 46 of their document. In 2021, it actually steps up to $16 and at $14 for the other one. So that's under market where it was performing at. I'm not sure if whatever tenant inducements may be in here, or if this is more of a short-term rent to alleviate space, meaning Wawanesa is getting their building built, obviously at True North, they're going to be occupying that building. And this was a short gap to occupy here, and they're going to move over there. And realistically, from the property owner, Bill MTS leaving, it's a short-term intermediate rent, meaning they're in there for a little bit, and then they'll move to the other building. But this here might address for some temporary vacancy until they can get another tenant or do whatever they're going to do with this building here. So given the strong performance of the building, and that's my main focus today, I'm not putting a significant amount of weight on the $14 that's there, because we saw leading up to the reference date years and years and years of performance of the prime low A at around $17.55 rent. So at that point, when we're in at $16 or just south of $16 at $15.89, and they're advertising at $16, and the achieved rent that was in place there, stabilized for a number of years, was $17.55. I think we're really assessed, and whatever the board decides, you've been fully informed of both parties' positions, and I'll wait to see what comes from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dupont, questions?
I'm not sure I caught this thing about the post-reference data. The lease for Wawanesa was in March 2020, effective December 2021. Are you referring to that, or?
Yeah, just so we're clear, that would be on a 2021 rec roll. That would come to me. as assessor. I can't look at a 2021 rent roll. I can stop at 2020 because I have access to that. Anything past that, the next year would be, from my perspective, from doing the studies, would be post-reference because I'm not getting it yet. There's no way I can get it. For appeal purposes, if it's April 1st or in front of that, you can look at it. But what I'm trying to say is, when we're looking at the marketplace in whole, I don't think those 90 days in isolation should just trump several years of how the building was performing. And that's ultimately what Altus's position seemed to be. And then the strength of the order that I brought in, obviously, or where the multifamily, the tax situation for that is that, and even if it was post-reference or not, by a few days, because ultimately the position was you can sort of calculate out what the taxes were going to be, but kind of speculative, whatever. But realistically, you should be looking at all the individual years in relationship to each other. So you have proper context when you're reviewing it. And in this case here, jumping the gun and jumping ahead to one singular rent, relying on it, I don't think is appropriate. So I have the study to rely on, we have the performance of the building to rely on, and we have the advertising property how it was. So that answers your question.
This 90 days, what period is that?
Well, from January 1st, 2021 to April 1st, 2000.
Okay, the last 90 days prior to the reference date. Okay, that's all questions.
Thank you, Ms. Nesbitt. Any questions?
Nope, I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And I don't think I've got any questions either. Thank you. Mr. Dupont, your presentation, please.
Yes, my first page. So the top of the page shows the assessor has it at $15.89 per square foot. And the bottom of the page, we're going $14 per square foot. Remarks in blue is that the Board of Revision reduced the assessment, the realty assessment based on Altus valuation. Altus rents were $14. Contract rents were $14, and the Board of Revision agreed to $14. There was no appeal to the municipal board by either the assessor or Altus. So whether Jeremy disagrees or not, they did not appeal themselves to the municipal board. Page 2 is the online assessment. Page 3 is the decision. Page 4, the decision says the decision is based on the evidence presented by the applicant. Then the page 5 is the start of the realty brief. We have the maps, etc. Page 7, it shows the subject leases and so the lease for Bell was at 16. It shows there from 2019. And then in March 2020, it says Wawanesa, who sublets space from MTS, signed a lease to rent 7 floors, 53,000. Some 42 square feet for $14 per square foot, starting in December 2021 for 3 years. This is until their new property was constructed. So they were, in fact, everybody knew they would be vacating at the end of that 3 years. But the owner rented to them for those 3 years at $14. And then August 2020, a lease was signed with CIBC for the 14th floor for $12 at 10 years also. So not just Wawanesa, CIBC also signed for lower rent, even $12 for 10 years. And Patterson Grain, they signed a lease for $24,670 per square foot from 2019 to 2028. There was no other space for lease, so that other leases in the building indicate actually 14 or even lower than that. Only Bell MTS themselves were higher. Page 8. And that was the income approach that we had, the rents that we were using. So we were using $16 a square foot on Bell space for 30,000 square feet. And the total square footage were 168,000. So that was a relatively small percentage of the total space. And Wawanesa, 53,000, $14. And it says lease start December 2021 on the far right, but then that was signed in March 2020. So that's prior to the reference date. Then it shows also the CIBC lease, $12. for 10 years. Patterson, $14 and 24,000 square feet till 2028, also close to 10 years. And then there was significant vacant space, 6 and 8, 14 and 38,000. So I had a lot of vacant space. So base at the time, they had accumulated a whole bunch of vacant space. So that was the market value as of the reference date. And the other tenants in that building and the vacancy support the fact that the rent that Wawanesa had was in fact at market. And that's what the board decided upon. Then subsequently that, I have the part of the assessor's report that they had. So they had 1589 per square foot. So that would be my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Dupont. Mr. Pohl, any questions?
Yes, I do. Given my brief, you've had access to look at it. You've had history. You're aware of the history of the subject property, the performance at $17.55. Hello?
Yeah, is there a question there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Let me rephrase it. Altus has represented this building in the past under appeal and used comparables from this property, correct?
Yeah, they did it in the past. Yeah.
You always see the $16 or the $6.70, which is referenced on your page 12. Why do we not ever see the $17.55 for the main tenant of the anchor tenant of the building prior to that? It's not inclusive of your rent in any way, shape, or form.
We showed the $6.70 rent, contract rent, but we use a market rent of $14 on that space.
You're choosing to grab a $6.70 rent to use as comparison, but you don't show the $17.55 rent that was the primary rent within the building for a span of almost a decade. Why are you choosing to ignore the rent that was in place for so long?
You're talking about prior rents?
Yeah. Well, the $6.70 is exactly what was there before too. So you seem to be able to grab the low rent, but ignore the market rent at $7.55. Why would $17.55?
Okay, I don't understand. Where does the $17 rent come from?
You are aware
that's your evidence. That's your evidence. That's not mine. So what evidence do you have at $17 that I should have considered?
You are aware that the building was primarily rented out at $17.55, correct?
No, I'm not. What evidence is there to that effect? I don't have that. And that's what the prior rent?
You're unaware up into the end of 2020, roughly in that time frame when NTS moved out, that they were occupying the building at $17.55, triple that.
I did not take that into consideration. I went under realty, and it shows the rent.
But yet you're able to differentiate and select the $6.70 rent on the same rent roll.
We're reporting rents as of the reference date. So there was no selection process. We showed exactly what was there.
Okay, moving on. The contract rent in place for Wawanesa. As you stated, everyone knows they're having primary building built for True North. They're only going to be there for 3 years at most.
Yes.
Do you feel that this short-term gap rent is indicative of market, or do you feel it as a stopgap rent to at least get something for their tenancy for that building when a large anchor tenant leaves, and that gives the property owner enough time to market their building to get back to the $17.55 rent or around there?
If it were a rent for 3 months or 6 months or even 1 year, you could say it's just a short-term rent that should be disregarded. But this is a 3-year rent, which is relatively normal.
Do you feel that this subject building, given that it was primarily occupied by one anchor tenant, do you feel that there are going to be multiple tenants where you get smaller CRUs in place, or that the property owners would be seeking a large anchor tenant to replace the one they lost, which would take more time?
They would put it on the market to attract a very large tenant. It would be a secondary purpose. They would likely try to rent one floor at a time. So for them to stay vacant for a long time and just because they want the full building rented, that would not be a proper way to look at it.
Let me ask you another question. A 3-year term. Do you consider that an investment grade lease or a short-term lease?
Oh, it's an investment for sure. There's other tenants, CIBC, Patterson, they rent it for less. And Bell Canada reduced their rent, reduced their space. And so they had 17.55 before, and then they changed it to 16. So they reduced their rent. So the market went down.
Typical investment leases are 5 to 10 years with options of another usually term or two. Where would you differentiate between an investment grade lease? You're saying 3. Is it 2-year term or 1-year term? Also investment grade?
I didn't go over 1 year. It's investment grade, and there's a lot of properties that are going month to month, and the landlords can decide whether to accept a month to month or a 3-year lease or rent to somewhere else on the market. If the market is not there, they have a whole bunch of vacant space, and so they accepted the 3-year lease. That's what the market was. So the owners acting on their own behalf. For profit, so that to me, there's absolutely no argument that can be made to say that $14 is not market rent.
I'll address the rest information.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt.
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
We've just lost Mr. Paul.
Should we go for a break? Oh, he's back.
Sorry, no, I'm back. Sorry, I had someone at the front door.
Okay, no, that's fine. Just to recap, Mr. Barrett, I don't think I had any questions. Ms. Nesbitt, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions either. And I heard, Mr. Pohl, you indicate that you wish to make a summary.
Yes, I do. Reliance on one singular rent is too much, especially when it is a short-term gap rent, meaning there's a large anchor tenant leaving. There's going to be a lot of space in this building that came. And in order to alleviate any time to absorb a large anchor tenant, because the building's set up in such a way that one anchor tenant would be ideal, or you're going to carve out sections of the building to make it a truly multi-tenanted building, which would take more time and investment. It would take more time of exposure to get a tenant such as that. To have a short-term gap such as one needs to come in, which is clearly not going to stay because they're having to build a couple blocks down. That is a good strategy for a property owner to fill that gap. You get some kind of income, but it's not at market. You see them operating, or you see their operation of their building at $17.55. You see long-term the performance of the building. It's clearly not at market at $14. Our study indicates where it should be at, just at around $16. We have it in at $15.89. I don't think there should be much weight put on the marketplace for realty as far as a sliver of it of the years leading up to the reference date. You don't stabilize 90 days at a municipal hearing. You stabilize at least 3 years. I do 5, and you should be taking out the marketplace leading up to the reference date, not a sliver section of it. And especially for an atypical lease where your main tenant coming in who's taking over space for a short term is having a building built a little ways downtown. So at that point, I think the board erred and used the $14 rent. And my suggestion is to use the model rent at $15.89 as it's well supported by the performance of the building for several years leading up to the reference, up until the vacancy, as well as other market parameters that I produced in the study. We class it as a B prime building. They class it as an A. I could have brought in A comparables. I thought that was a little too much. It's borderline A, B prime, borderline A. So at that point, I feel the $15.89 is appropriate, and the board should be confirming that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DuPont, any summary?
Yes. So the MTS lease there on page 48 of Jeremy's report is that the MTS had negotiated a reduced rate of $14 a square foot on some of the space. Their lease expired December 2021, and they renegotiated that at $14. And then, so it was done at 14 with MTS and done at 14 with Wawaniso. So it was done twice. So the landlord accepted $14 up to December 2026 on that space, and Wawaniso came in at $14. So we should not ignore the circumstances, the market value as of the reference date and what happened in the past. We should not be considering. We should looking at the evaluation date as of the reference date. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes this matter, and we will move on to number 8. Before we do, does anyone need a break? 5-minute break. Is 5 minutes going to be enough?
Yep,
5 minutes.
5 minutes is good. Thank you.
Take some more, Mr. Chair.
Let's reconvene in 5 minutes.
You can go extend your parking.
Yes, I have to extend my parking too, but I'll do it by phone. Thank you. Thank you. Call this meeting back to order. And if we can turn to number 8 on the docket, please. That's 2100 360 Main Street. Are there any preliminary matters, Mr. Assessor or Mr. Applicant?
No, other than the lateness of all the briefs, which I've already addressed in the beginning covers all the things here today.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Then, Mr. Pohl, would you please lead us through your report?
Sure. File number 224415. The business ID number, or business assessment ID number is 24286. This is for 360.
No, sorry, if I might interrupt for a minute, please. I have a different business assessment ID number and a different file number. I have file number 224416 and a business assessment ID of 41309.
Yep, I'm one ahead of you. I apologize. All right, bear with me here. I'm glad you caught it right away.
We could have just reversed the order, I guess, but let's.
All right, we're back in business. All right, file number 224416. Again, file number 4416. Address is 360 Main. It's on partial 20 and 21 floors, 360 Main. Business assessment ID number is 4139. The subject property or the tenant is Toronto Dominion Bank, obviously TD. Below is the annual rental value of 680,520. The total area premise is 28,125 square feet. We have a total ARV of 2420. Below that, we have a base ARV per square foot rate or a net rent rate of $22.42 and $21.34. Both those rents were confirmed, or the rents part anyways were confirmed as part of the realty appeal. I'll get to that in a moment. The occupancy costs are to the right, and that's made back to the 680,520. So what we have next below that is the contract rent, which appears to be at $16 for 15 years. So again, investment grade lease, not 3 years, anchor tenant. So differentiation between what's an investment grade lease and what's a short-term gap lease. The next page over is the realty order. 360 Main Street. It was done between, like I said, no portage was done between Mr. Slaughter and myself. The property value was reduced from 174,515,000 down to 159,396,000. But in that order, there was detailed rationale followed on page 3. Both income streams used the rental rate presented by the Assessment and Taxation Department, both realty the concourse area and the office tower area. So again, those rents that we just discussed were confirmed on that aspect. There was changes to the vacancy, shortfall, and non-recoverables, and I believe the cap rate as well. Cap rate as well. So at that point, that was the emphasis of the reduction. So the actual review that I did for my studies from the A&Bs, in this case here it was the A study, were confirmed. So I'll get into that now. So on page 5 of my brief, and again, sorry, maybe I should stop. Every hearing is de novo. I'm sure all parties know that. But when we go through a full realty brief like this, and we do an analysis the way we have, I'm going to rely on it as it's be the same information we presented again. So I do take great weight to the orders that come. And if there's any differentiation between where I feel there may be an error or a difference of opinion in myself, I'll point that out as I do. But again, we're relying on the realty brief as well, because it was a big brief. it was a long brief. On page 1, okay, so page 2 of the brief, or 6 of our brief here today, we see that is a 360 Main. It's a premier building. It's a Class A building, and it's certified LED gold, which is a incredibly high standard. It is the same standard that the True North building was achieved. So it's on par with that as far as LUMA. There's only one other building in the city which is greater than that, and that is the Hydro building, which is an animal unto itself. It's beyond the rest of the marketplace. So moving forward from that, we see that it's won awards. It's won the Toby Award, and that they deem it be a LED gold or LED gold certification. So the anchor tenants that are in the building, as you see, are below, and TD is one of them. Again, you don't have an anchor tenant in your building for 1 to 3 years. It just doesn't happen. The leases are effectively greater than that, significantly greater than that, because they are your anchor tenants. You fill the rest of your building with smaller tenancies, 3 to 5 years, so to speak, and you fill the gaps in between the spaces that the anchor tenants can't take up. So that's typically what goes on the marketplace, and that's why you see these tenancies being advertised and not your 3,500 square foot CRU. It just doesn't work that way. So on page, moving on from page 7, this is the income stream starting on page 8 that we presented. That's for the concourse area. We'll get to that in the next appeal. On the next income stream, the class, the OFA or the office portion of it, we see highlighted in yellow the 2 bids, premise IDs, if you will, the $22.42 and the $21.34. They were under appeal and they were confirmed. That portion of the deal was confirmed. Moving on to page 13 of the brief, we'll scroll through some pictures of the property. Obviously, this is at Portage and Main. It's been deemed at the time of acquisition by Artis as the premier office building in the city. There's been a few other ones been built since then, but clearly Artis REIT indicates that they have the best building in the city at that point of purchase, and I don't disagree. It's one of the premier buildings in the city. So again, just rolling through the property. As you can see, it has all the amenities of Class A. It's connected to the concourse. It is the concourse underneath. So, moving along down to page, just going through the pictures. Bear with me here. Okay, page 37. So you can go through the pictures if you will. On page 37, we see the basic rent that was being asked in 2018. Again, the taxes indicated that's estimated for 2019 because it didn't know them. So in 2018, this is the listings that were for the property. We see that floors 1 through 16 was being asked at $20 a square foot, triple net. Floor 17 and above was at $22 and up, triple net. So as you can see, those are the rates that will be in place. And the next page is over, just a few more leasing advertising. You can see that confirmed. In 2021, leading into spring of 2021, those are the same rates that were in place at 2020 and for $20 for the lower 16 floor and down, and 17 floors and up at $22. So moving on, we see that on page 44 that they have a new concourse area. They have a lower one and now they have an upper one. Obviously, there's Good Life, there's the rules. If you've never walked through it, it's done very well. There's a few other eateries in it. Again, connected to the Skywalk. On page 48 was the vacancy within the building itself. And they advertised that there was 17% vacancy within the building. And again, a lot of that had to play in with CRA moving into the building. The former tenancy within the lower floors was Artist Reed. A bulk of it was Artist Reed. They moved to 220 Portage and occupied that building to accommodate the space that CRA needed to move from Broadway in. There's been some debate on that rent. To clarify that moving forward in time. So moving forward, obviously the shops are what they are, indicating the space at basic asking rent was $25, and that's on page 53 for the concourse area. We will get to that momentarily, as the realty brief for this was the same that was presented and will be presented for the TD for the concourse area rent as well, but I'll touch on that now since we're going through it. So again, $25 is generally what they're asking for the older concourse area, not the newer one. So as we move along, just some pictures of obviously the multifamily tower that's gone up on the south side of the property. Again, creating more demand. It's effectively changed the skyline. On the next page is 62, is the permits that we had taken out on the building. Again, I just did a short summation. I'm not going to get into too much on this because it's more the realty side of it. But as you can see, there's about $88 million invested. As we go along, people all the way to the end of it. There's effectively been $90 million spent on the building, including of a complete envelope restoration, electrical, mechanical systems, as well as tenant spaces improvements, and obviously the subject property, including the basement, concourse area, TD. So what I was trying to indicate here is, given a Class A building, you see that the significant amount of investment they have in this property, and you invest in this property as such because you can recapture that money coming out. It is a Class A building. It dominates the marketplace. It sets the marketplace. That's a better way to look at it. What Class A's do influence the residual classes, B's obviously, and then filters down as a trickle-down effect. But having said that, you're at the apex of the marketplace in a building like this. So the next page over is starting with the permits, some of the recent permits that were taken out. And if you move to page 68, this is the permit that was taken out from TD, CRU, 20th and 21st floors. We see that it was approximately $4 million taken out to invest in this tenant space. So there was a tenant improvement here of approximately $4 million. And then the CRA is the one below that as well. I can see the permit value on that is significant at $35 million mark. Sorry, $3.5 million. $3.5 million for the CRU there. Put an extra zero in there by mistake. So the rest of the anchor tenants, as you can see, as we're going through, we're showing significant investment on these. So from that point, we'll move on from the permits, as that was more relative to the realty side. On page 79 of the brief, we see that this was when it was acquired in 2010. The CEO of Artist Reed indicating that it was the best they believe it was the best office property, based on obviously. I don't dispute that. Obviously, moving forward in a year's time, there's a couple other properties that were developed, and True North, obviously, 311 Portage. Those are competing properties, and newer buildings unto themselves. But at this point in time, it's a premier building. No dispute there. And from that point on, I've included the rent rolls that you can highlight and you can see. If you look on page 83, highlighted in red, we see a $16 rent, actually free rent, if you look at the way that it looks. And then base rent of $16 goes to $20 and then $22. My question at appeal, again, we'll be here today, is who paid for the $4 million improvement? Typically within the marketplace, if you're an anchor tenant, I'll invest in my CRU. It'll anchor me there. I'll spend the money. I won't walk away from my money that I invested in my CRU because then I'm out that money. And from an owner's perspective, it secures the tenancy there. They don't have to cover the cost. They don't have to cover the tenant improvement, or there may be a sharing of that cost. But typically, there's some investment on, or mostly investment on the tenant side. And that's a good strategy from an anchor tenant standpoint. You give a bit of a break for the first term or so, and then later on, as long as you complete all your terms, you're back at market kind of thing. So that is not rents that any agent or assessor should be using to justify reduction in assessed value. Tenant inducements are spoken to ad nausea. I have done it at these level appeals and at the municipal board. I have yet to see one order that indicated that tenant inducements should be used to reduce market value. In this case here, I highly suspect that there's a tenant inducement. You can see a free rent there, but you also see the $4 million that were invested in the property. So it begs the question, who paid for that tenant improvement? We've already had some discussion on CRA, who paid for that. It's coming to light now that about half of it was paid by CRA, where at appeal it was indicated that it wasn't. So I believe there'll be some correction on that standpoint moving forward. But again, that's a different CRU, so we can move forward. If we go through the rest of the rent roll, please feel free to look at floors 17 and up to justify for yourself what the current rent is in place and what the rents were. You'll see many older rents still hovering around that $20 mark for the subject property, or for the building itself. So when you see a subject property in there at $16, it raises red flags, especially with the improvements to the CRUs. On the next page, starting at page 106, is a synopsis of the rent roll itself, and I put in as best I could. They have a gigantic rent roll. I can't do it any different than what presented here. It's a very large building. So you see there is some vacancy appreciated in that, but again, CRU, the CRU predominantly occupies about a third of the building. Takes that into account. So on page 107, municipal board orders, as I spoke to regarding tenant inducements, there have been multiple orders that indicate there is no tenant inducement that should be allowed. You can't go out and you can grab 5 or 6 or 8 rents and say these are the rents at market, and really they're being influenced by tenant inducements which are below market, and then shouldn't be doing that. That speaks to these orders here. I've yet to see an agent produce an order from the municipal board that indicated that tenant inducements should be used to reduce market value or adjust market value. I haven't seen it yet. In all the cycles of the board revision of this board, I haven't seen one yet. If one existed, we'd know about it by now. So at that point, I hope that raises and answers that discussion, which obviously influences rent. And then moving on to the study for the Class A, which will be starting on page 110. This is again the same sister study. And again, I'll read through a bit of this here. As far as tenant inducements, I'll read through the rent, since the rent is where we basically are. The rent data shown consists of new leases or terms or step-ups signed in an individual year, minimum and maximum asking rents achieved Minimum and maximum ASCII and achieved rents ranges are also examined to ensure outlying rents, usually below market for tenant inducements. And that's the essence of having a max and a min to check to see where the majority of the marketplace is, are identified to minimize the distortive effects on assessing purposes. Assessors satisfy that through proper use of the study, any outlier rents have minimal impact on the marketplace results. So inherently, I can't remove all of it. It's not possible. I can't go through 666 CRUs that were looked at over 6 years. I can't get 666 leases to review. It's an impossible task. So when we use this appropriately, we can minimize the distorted rents effective on rent. So, and the order below that references one of the orders that I've already listed here. So I'm not going to go at any further than that. From that point, we can move on and we can move to the actual study itself. The weighted average for 2020 was $19.94, so about $20. And the 3-year stabilized was $19.21. So again, that's for all of the Class A buildings. There is a range. 200 Graham is a little less. 400 St. Mary's is a little less. Obviously, the 3 Towers at Portage of Maine. Richardson Building is a little bit less. It's primarily between 201 Portage and 360 Main Street. So, and just so we're clear, I left out True North. True North is a different animal. It is you can call it a double prime A, whatever label you want on it. Their rental rates, triple net, hover between starting at about $30, $31 and around $34 to $36 on average. That is a significantly different animal. I don't think it was appropriate to be included in this rent study, and that's why it's left out and appropriately so. So moving on, we'll look at the subject property. 360 Main. There's 13 CRUs that leased up approaching the reference date. We had for 2020, we had $19.20, and stabilized over 3 years, we had $20.36. And as you can see in 2018, that $16 minimum rent is the subject property that we're dealing with here today. It's significantly below the performance of the building in any year. You see from 2015 all the way leading up to 2020, it doesn't average $16. Not even close. So from that point, we'll move on and we'll look at what was being asked. I think I've already referenced it with what was being asked for within the building, the upper floors or what they are. But overall, the Johnson report doesn't differentiate between floors. They don't get that detailed. But you can see from 360 Main, they're averaging about $20 for starting in 2015 and leading up to 2020, they're at 21. So that's kind of like the general building, but obviously on an upper floor, they're asking greater than that. So moving on, we see on page 115 is the start of Altus's brief, which they submitted. We see that on page 11 is the rental rates that they're looking at. And then on page 118 is the bulk of the ones in red is the CRU or them. I look at it as multiple CRUs. If it's under lease, it doesn't make it one CRU as long as it's demising separate and individual entrances and entrances. That's multiple CRUs. Just because they're encapsulated in one lease doesn't mean it's one CRU. So there's multiple CRUs there on a floor by floor basis. And Altus indicated that the face rent was $16.45, and then an undercovered $5, and then their net contract was $11.45. There were some issues with who paid for the renovation of the building. I believe that's going to be clarified moving forward in a more positive way. But I'll leave it at that. I don't think that $11.45 rent is reflective of market at all. It's half of what you expect to get in your building. So at that point, we can take that off the mark. We can take that off consideration today, and highlighted in yellow below that is $20.50, or is unit 250 and 2100. And again, these are all separate unit numbers because they are all separate and indemnizable CRUs. So there's multiple CRUs. As you can see here, they're in at $16. The question remains is again, is the same tenant improvements, which we see for the bulk of CRAs being was reflected one way, is now positions might be being changed as far as what they paid for. Is TD paying the $4 million for the space to be renovated? And if so, does that equate to the low rate of rental rate? Or is there a portion of that the property owner is paying and and TD is paying? Regardless, we can see that that rental rate is out of line with market by a significant amount. And ultimately, I don't need to go anything further through their appeal. Ultimately, we can see that starting off, board itself, again, re-emphasize it on page 3 of my brief, confirm the rates applied for the office tower by the assessment department as well as the rates applied in the concourse area. So with that, I feel that it's well justified at the rental rates that were already confirmed, and I'm asking for them to be confirmed here again today. So with that, I'm the questions.
Thank you. Mr. Dupont, any questions?
You mentioned TI's $1 million or so. Where'd you get that information from?
It's on the permit that is associated with this space. It was a little over $4 million. It is on my page 68. It highlights the 2 floors, 20 and 21st. Declared construction value $4,025,000. And typically what I already know and what we're already reviewing, and hopefully we'll have a better discussion moving forward, is what is the relationship and who paid for that money. Typically your anchor tenant will get some sort of break. They'll pay for their remote improvements as a portion of it to secure the building. The property owner gets the benefit of not having to cover that cost, and the security and the tenant not wanting to walk away from their investment capital. Because I mean, if they leave the building, they're not taking a capital investment with them. So that's where it comes from.
The decisions of the municipal board, did they not state in there that you cannot deduct TIs because the purchaser would not have to pay these TIs? So if it was paid by a previous landlord, the purchaser would get that full income without having to pay TIs. So wasn't that one of the reasons they said not to use the TIs?
There's multiple orders and there's multiple rationale. The rationale always comes back to the same thing. Tenant inducement shouldn't be used to influence, whether you look at it from a rent perspective or an expense perspective. Ultimately, you should be using it to influence market or change market value or reduce market value. That's the general synopsis of every single one that I've looked at. If you want an individual rationale for whatever arguments were on that day, I mean, I just have the ones that I presented here today. There are lots.
So your page 68, the building permit, does it say who took it out?
Type of work, description, no, I don't believe it says. I mean, it was obviously applicant was number 10 design group and the owner of the building, but it doesn't say who paid for what. We ran into that with, and I don't want to get off into the CRA lease, but the issue was who paid for the tenant improvements at appeal. Generally, it was they didn't pay for it. After review of some information moving forward, it looks like it was about an even split for the money that was paid, but I haven't been able to confirm that with Altus or the property owner. We just listened to a voice message. I haven't been able to get back to Rod on. So generally speaking, looks like there's a bit of both here. For the one tenant, you would expect that maybe that'd be the same for TD, or maybe the lease is different. I can't comment.
For realty, you assess this property, what average rent for the realty?
Well, I'm not really looking at it from an average rent. We're looking at the tenants. We see that it's a new tenanted space. They did $4 million of work. It is an updated space. But having said that, all anchor tenants within this building appear to have that. That's why we went through the permits.
On your page 11,
on page 11, it's $20.87, but that's from floors 1 and all the way up to the breaking point, which is floor 16.
so why are you higher 2242 and 2131, and then the average of the whole building?
It's the quality of space, and again, the property owners themselves are making a restriction where it starts at a greater rent at floor 16. So you're on 20 and 21. It's right in line with market within the building, and right in line with what their advertising is.
And then the Johnson reports, they showed the asking rent was $21. So if they're asking 21, they would accept less than 21.
No, they're showing, like I stated, $21, but there's a differentiation between the different areas. They don't have 2 asking rents in the Johnson report, so there must be taking a synopsis of all of it. My best guess. But as far as asking rent, you see the rents that are in place. We have actual evidence, and we're relying on the actual leases that are in place in my study. So I reference, and I want to be clear to the panel and to the agent, I reference the entire marketplace in totality. We're not hiding anything. We're not omitting anything. We're taking it from a signed contract, and we see within the building on my page 4 of the study, which is page 113 of my brief, we see there are 13 CRUs that leased out between 2018 and 2020. That average was $20.36 weighted. But we also see that the tenant, which is the low one, minimum rent was TD. So if you take that out, you'd be even greater than $20.36 on average. So we're right there. My question, well, I'll wait to question that for yourself when it comes my turn. But we have contract for rent within the marketplace, within that building, within the other buildings as well. So when we see the average at in 2020 at $19.94 for the entire populace, including the lower there. I hate to call an OFA a low OFA, but some don't produce at the same economic rent level as this property does. But the weighted average within the subject property is greater than the average. You would expect that. It's basically one of the 2 prime buildings in the city. So.
And you're using the rents in place as of 2020?
All the rents, all the CRs that you see leased out with 152 CRUs of the study, the 152 CRUs that leased out within the 2018 to 2020 are within those years. Every expense, every vacancy, every shortfall, every non-recoverable is in linear relationship to that individual year. So.
I'm just wondering if your rents in place include the leases that were signed 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
I only went back 6 years, and I stabilized the last 3. And the reason why I did that is because basically, if I'm at a municipal court level hearing, I'm looking at the last 5 years. I did it next year in this case here because of the way the cycles work, I'm looking to look at 5-year stabilize, or I'm looking at the 5 years, but I'm typically stabilizing the last 3. So that's why I did the 18, 19, and 20. If the board chooses to go with the 5-year stabilize, they can. If they want to look at all the data, they can.
That's all questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt, questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Dupont, your presentation, please.
I got to open it. Okay. Page 1. So the shows the assessors has 2 areas, 18,855 and 9270 square feet. And the actual lease is higher. And so I assume Jeremy will not argue with that. So the assessment for the first party, 18,855, is 2134. Now TD paid $16 a square foot, but they leased both units together. So it's one lease for both. So for this one, I added 10%. For the other one, I added 9.99 or whatever. So I basically added 10% area to both. And my comments on the right in blue are as follows. So the 2023 Realty, they use the city rents. So the city rents were shown there, 18,855 and 9270 at 21 and 22. The total rents is 28 square feet, 28,125. Then the far right says Altus square footage. What we had was 30,920. So we had more square footage than the assessor, and that's from the lease. So that's what we had. So we used 20,741 for that one tenant by going 10% higher, even though the lease is for 30,920 in total. Now I could have just done the total value, but I split it the same way as the assessor, right? And so one way to do that is just to go 10% above the assessor area for both. So page one, the ARV comes to 383,700 rounded, and then in red at the bottom I add both the second portion with 9220 square feet. So my total request is 572,040. So page two. So the assessor has 9270 at 2242, a slightly higher rent than the other one at 21. And this one we added 9.8% to the square footage. To around two, so we arrive at the exact square footage 30,920 that they show in the lease. So in essence, I'm matching what they had in the lease. And Altus Realty also had the 30,920. It shows the contract on the blue portion there. It shows the contract was $16 at 30,920, and that's what Altus used also. And the lease was from July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2023. But that's the first step, first 5 years, and actually goes to 2033, 15 years. We'll get to that. And so there's an appeal at the Municipal Board of Standing. So page 3 is the online assessment. It's in 2 parts, and I put it in 2 parts also. And the Board of Revision decision, they reduce the assessment, but the decision is that they base on the net income and the cap rate, and this reflects the rental rate by the assessment department. For both income streams. So they use the city rents for both, and they vary the other parameters. And so the board agreed with the assessor rents overall, but it's individual rents could be looked at based on their contract rents, etc. So the page 7, we start with the realty report that we had, and page 8. That shows the part of the rent roll that we had, where we show the suite starting suite 1800. So KPMG had a lease of 19,000 square feet at 1850, starting in 2020, and then suite 2000 rent $19 starting 2012, finishing 2022, and TD Bank is shown there. $16, 30,920. So that's what we had in our report. And the lease was July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2033, 15 years. But it goes up by 5 years increments. Then it shows some of the vacant and some of the other tenants. So some have a lease at $24, but it's an older lease, 2016 and one 2017. Some at $20. Ernst & Young, well, those are smaller now at $15. So TD is the lowest on this page, but it's not an old lease, and it's not a short-term lease. It's a long-term lease. And that's what they pay. So that's a contract rent. And that's what we're going by. And then we can go to page 10. It's from the rent roll. I believe that Jeremy had that also. So it shows $16 there, but towards the bottom of that, and it shows the lease date, so July 2018 to and there's $16, and 2023 goes up to 20, and 2028 goes up to 22. So they got the 15 years, 16, 20, and 22. But what they're currently paying until 5 years, until 2023, is $16. Arm's length lease, I believe we should go with that. Yeah, we showed the assessor's report, etc., and the on page 16 that it shows that the assessor was using $20.87 overall. But subject contract is less than that, and the assessor's overall rent is higher than their rents at 21 and 22 for a subject property. So that's my report.
Thank you. Mr. Bull, questions?
I'll keep it short. Generally, this is the exact same information that was presented at Realty side of it?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. At that Realty appeal, CRA was deemed to have paid, or the property owner was deemed to pay of all the tenant improvements for their space. I've had some conversation with Rod that was not actually correct at this point. Are you aware, did TD pay for all or some or what portion of the of the series spaces that were $4 million for the tenant improvements?
I'm not aware.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ms. Nesbitt.
I have none, thank you.
And I have no questions. Any need for summary, Mr. Pohl or Mr. Dupont?
Generally speaking, this was a large realty appeal, lots of moving parts. The board reviewed everything in full, and it was confirmed. The rent portion was confirmed, so I'd expect that the panel would have confirmed it today with the same information we present on both parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dupont.
A purchaser that would buy this property would not care who paid the $4 million in TIs. What that purchaser would get would be the $16 rent, and then 5 years they get 20, and then another 5 years they get 22. They would buy the property based on the actual rent in place, and it wouldn't matter who paid for the TIs. That's what the purchaser would get. Thank you.
Thank you. This matter is now concluded, and we will turn to number 9 on the list. I note that this is the same address, 360 Main Street. The briefs look similar. We can apply the bulk of the information that was referred to and was testified to in the previous hearing. But if Mr. Pohl, you can lead us through the differences in your report and where they fall, please.
Okay, bear with me here. I just need 1 minute to open the brief.
Okay. And if you have more, I'm not trying to cut anybody off.
That's good rationale. That's appropriate rationale, and I was going to suggest that. So
Okay.
Bear with me here.
If you have something else to add, please feel free, though.
Sorry. I apologize. I lost my link. I'm going to have to reestablish it. Okay, file number is 224415. The address is 812-360 Main Street. Business assessment ID number is 24286. Again, TD is the tenant. The annual rental value is 130,800. The total area is 5,573 square feet with a total ARV of $23.47. The base ARV or net rent was $20.97, and their associated costs, occupancy costs to the right, which gets you back to the ARV of $130,800. So again, same issues. We have a contracted rent at $5 for a space in the concourse area where they're generally seeking $20. So we spoke to that in the other brief. So we'll go over the same here, same order. And I know we went into a bit detail on the other one, but I'll do it again. It's limited now, but same order, same idea, highlighted in yellow, that the concourse area rent, which is the first paragraph under the board's conclusion, the rent in place was confirmed. When we move it along to the realty portion of it, I won't go through the description of the building again, but on page 8, we see that the quality of finish, we have it as high as it is a bank, highlighted in yellow, and that was at $20.97. So this exact rent was reviewed and confirmed at appeal for the realty. As we move along, I'll skip quickly. I am cognizant of the time. On page 21, that is the CRU we're speaking of. That is the TD Bank. I go in there all the time. That's my bank. So as we move along, we see again, we'll just touch on the rents on page 53. Again, I'll wait till you catch up. Let me know when you're there. Hopefully we're all there at page 53.
Hey, I'm here.
The basic asking rent was $25, and that's the cost for the general spaces there. So that was in 2021, obviously the spring, and they didn't know the 2022 estimates as far as cost because it didn't occur yet. So $25 is what they're asking. We'll skip all the way through all the pictures. We've already went through them. We'll skip through the permits. I did not and could not locate the permit for the concourse area. I don't know if it was because of the new concourse that was put in on top. I know there was a replot, but when I searched for it, I could not find it. My assumption is there was obviously something that was spent on that space. It converted it to a TD bank. So it wasn't a pre-existing bank. It was obviously brand new space. It was gutted and re-renovated. I assume it would be done at the same level of the tenant spaces, if not greater, of the office tower, because it is a bank. It's a higher degree of space. So moving forward from that, I will touch on the rents that were in place. Obviously, we have a $5 rent in place. That is not market. TIs, I believe, are at play again. When we go through the actual rents, the comparables that we used, they are on. Pardon me if I go through all the comps. It is on page 110, and those are the CRUs that are in place that we use for comparables. And on the next page, and we see that it was $31.43 for the weighted average. And then we see that the bank comparables, which were on the next page as well, which were already used at the 2023 cycle. And then furthermore, the 360 Main, which is the hydro building, the bank space that we've already discussed. We see that for that, 360 Main Street, which is what we already discussed already today for the other field for this. I won't get into that in any more detail because we've already discussed that. But moving on to the 360 Portage, I misspoke there. 360 Portage, which is the hydro building, the bank space underneath there again, newer build. we see that Altus wanted $31.08, and that's a pretty good comparison. Even though it's underneath the building, it's still on the skywalk, it's still up attached. So again, a bit of a superior building, obviously, in front of it. There's only one of the hydro buildings in North America. Not going to go any further than that. But we see that the Altus accepted a $31.08 rent. Given the subject property is very similar underneath a prime building, prime OFA on the concourse, very large foot traffic. We see that $20.97, again, almost a full $10 on that, I think is pretty reasonable. And with that, time open to questions.
Thank you. Mr. Dupont, questions?
Yeah, you have some rent rolls on page 97 and that. Where's the TD Bank rent roll in your brief?
Bear with me here. I can find it for you. Rent roll starts on page 81. And you'll just have to bear with me here while I search it out because it's large. The concourse area.
I believe it's page 89.
80, sorry. Yeah, I'm on 88. No, it's not on. Sorry.
Day 12, Toronto.
Bear with me. I'm working on a 13-inch laptop. On this scale, it's pretty hard. Okay. Yes, it is on page 89, which would have been page 16 of the INE that was submitted to us, so the rent roll anyways. And they're indicating $5, yes.
It's $5, and if you go down a little bit, they'll tell you the years. So 2018 to 2023 is $5. You agree with that? Then the next 5 years goes up to 10, and the year after that goes up to 15.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in dispute of that advice there.
Okay, I just want to bring that up as fact because you were just saying $5, but it's stepping up every 5 years. That's all questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt, any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Merritt? You might be muted, Mr. Merritt.
Mr. Mahone, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have no questions. Mr. Dupont, your presentation, please.
Okay, yeah, it's opening now. It's a different format than the others, but I went a little bit more formal on this one. So I start off with the cover page and then the page 2. I show that I'm asking for 121,500. Show the photos, etc. And the page 4 show the market rents. So the 360 Main has the offices, and then it has the food courts, and then have the mall. And so now I'm showing the rents on the mall part only. So page 4. So the rents in the mall. So they have the larger spaces. So TD is 59.26. It's shown there. It's $5. But it jumps to 10 and 15. So on average, it gets $10 over the 15-year term. So the large units, they have Starbucks, 2217 square feet, 34. And that was a renewal in 2017. So they're there already. So it's not a new tenant. So they got a vested interest there. And Crosstown Credit Union, they have been there for a long time, and they renewed in 2018 at $27. So that's a renewal. The Winnipeg Square Dental, that's 1,000 square feet, that was new at 23, and the UPS store was new in 2018 at 1,000 square feet, 22. So the new ones are paying less than the renewals. The Sunrise Health is smaller, and that was a step from 2016. And Artistries is shown there at $10. So the subject lease at $5 is less than the other tenants for sure. Then I have the remarks. Rent starts at $5, steps up by $5 and some 23, another $5 and some 28. Units previously vacant. So the part of the reason they rented to TD Banks is that they have that mall and they have some small tenants. To get TD would bring a better tenant mix and maybe attract more people to that mall if they have a better tenant. So I think because it's a bank and it's a new lease rather than a renewal, they were attracted. The owner was prepared to have a lower rent because it was a better tenant that could bring some foot traffic to the area. So given the much larger size of the premise where TD Bank is larger than all the other mall tenants, there's only a few mall tenants. And having specific reference to the actual lease in place at $15 by 2028, I'm going with $18 per square foot, which I believe is quite high in relation to the actual lease in place. A buyer would not be getting 18. The buyer would be getting $15 starting in 2028. It's an actual contract lease. And so the owner, which is very professional and knowledgeable, did decide to rent to TD at those rates. However, I didn't want to go with the actual lower rate, $5. And even 10 that they paid in 2023 seems a bit low. So I use $18 per square foot. And the next page is the what I submitted for the other ones. That's the where it shows the assessor on top. So they use $20.97. We're using $18. And the blue part will show what the board decisions were, etc. We refer to the contract rents, etc. So when we apply $18 a square foot, it comes to 121, 43 rounded, 121,500. I checked the 2020 business assessment, and Altus was asking for $15 then. So I took that into consideration myself when it comes with 18s that we asked for 15 in the past. I believe we got 15 to the board. And so now I'm asking for 18. And then we have all the data. I think we've been through it. No, I do have the rent roll, but I forgot to put the part where they had the increase in the rent. So I have that. I have to rotate my view. I have that on page 17. It shows the $5, but I didn't show the step ups, which we went through with Jeremy's report, so that we know that it goes up $5 every 5 years thereafter. And that's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Questions?
Yeah, can you please turn to page 25? Or I guess it'd be 15. I can't tell, it's kind of blurred. At the realty appeal for A13, bottom of the page, your Altus has presented $5, the actual contract rent. As
yes, yeah,
so My next question would be a little further down. You see Pizza Hotline, which is vacant, and another space which is vacant, just literally right across from where the CRU is. And Altus's opinion for non-bank space is at $24. And that was
Yes, that's what we had for the realty. But I'm saying the TD Bank is a better tenant for the owner. So to have a bank there in 15 years, it would bring stability to the malls. I believe that's one of the reasons they should have a lower rent, because it's very desirable for the owner to have them.
okay. So you see that the asking rent to get in the mall is around $25 advertised by the owner. You see that Altus's opinion for vacant space is around $24. Okay, about $1 less. And then you see at a $5 rent that's in place contract and a doubling, which typically your step ups don't double to 10, albeit it's 5 till 10. Why would at a $5 rate being 20% of what they actually expect to get should be considered? Does that not raise red flags in your mind's eye as to who paid for the tenanted improvements within the space?
The owner, it was listing for 25, but they accepted a real lease at 5, 10, 15. So that's what they actually did. So now we were saying, what's the market rate of this particular property? It's the largest in the mall. All the others are much smaller.
Okay. Given that there's been some discrepancies between tenant inducements and who paid for what, given the realty side of it for CRA, which is coming to light now, post appeal, have you examined the leases in place for this CRU to confirm what the owners paid and what TD paid?
No, I did not confirm. All I know is that what they're actually paying and what the purchaser would get.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
I'm not muted. Thank you. I have one question. Mr. DuPont, you have a slight discrepancy in regards to your square footage. You're a little higher than the city.
Oh, 5926 and the assessor's got
5573.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm willing to go with the higher square footage because that's what the lease says.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Nesbitt, any questions?
No, I was gonna ask about the square footage too, so thanks, Ron.
I think we're all on the same page on that one. Thank you. And I have no questions. Any need of a summary, Mr. DuPont or Mr. Paul?
No, I think as long as the same rationale applied from the other one to hear the tenant inducements and what was at play with the actual who paid for what issue, which for one main tenant in this building after appeal for CRA seemed to be coming to light now, I would think that same rationale should lie here. But given that the rents were already confirmed at the realty side and the same information being presented again here today, I would think that confirms. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DuPont?
I don't believe the board should be basing their decision on speculation. So the assessor's questioning who paid for the TIs. The assessor has a burden of proof. So they had the burden of proof. So they don't have the proof as to who paid for the TI. So we should not rely on their questions or their speculations. We know what the rents are. We know what the contract rents are. We know what they step up to. And that's what the purchaser would pay if they bought it. And it doesn't matter who paid for TIs or how much it was, whether it was $5 TIs or $5,000 or more. It doesn't matter. So that was the actual rents in place. Thank you.
Thank you. This matter is concluded and we will move on to number 10 on the list, the last item today, 615 375 Main Street. Any preliminary matters, gentlemen?
No,
not for me.
Okay, then Mr. Pohl, can you lead us through your presentation, please, your report?
Sure. File number is 2240. File number 224337. The address is 375 Main Street, Unit 615. The business assessment ID number is 40093. The owner or the tenant is Bentel Green Oak Canada Limited. And there is some issue whether they're an arm's length or not. We see that the annual rental value is $9,120 for an area of 4,114 square feet for an overall ARV of $21.91. Below that, the base rent or net rent was $19.40, and the occupancy costs are associated with the premise to the right. Below are the contracted rents. As you can see, they start in 17 and 19. On the next page, we had this under appeal, similar to the other properties. This was decreased by the board. But if you look on the next page, the rent portion was confirmed, highlighted in yellow. So when we go through the property realty rule or realty appeal, which I'll be relying on today, the first page is on page 5. Again, Class A building. Of the 3 towers at Portage and Main, this is albeit the first one, now obviously the oldest one. It's got a Bowman Best silver, I believe, and they're working towards gold. If you look on page 9, the PID highlighted in yellow was the 1940. That was confirmed at the hearing. Pictures are on page 12. Obviously, we know the Richardson building, that's where it's in. And the Richardson building does have a component of owner-occupied property. Some are pretty obviously have Richardson as the tenancy name, and others are a little off. For example, Tundra Gas. I did not know Tundra Gas was associated with Richardson, so that was brought up at last appeal. So essentially, the same information is going to be reviewed for the other towers. I won't go into as much detail, but read through it if you will. Clearly, starting on page 21 to 22, you see the investment done in the property. It's a little less than what you would expect on a building that's truly 100% marketed and non-owner occupied, because you just naturally have to do that. But if you're owner occupied, kind of.
You're muted,
Okay.
Jamie.
Mr. Pohl, I think you muted yourself.
Oh.
Now we're off.
Uh-oh.
Oh. Backwards. Can you hear us, Mr. Pohl?
Something happened there, Ian. I'm not sure what. But he's disappeared.
He looks like he's trying to reconnect on his phone now. He's disconnected?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll give him a moment to reconnect.
Should we go for a break?
We'll take a short break.
I think so. I don't know.
Okay, let's take a couple minutes while he reconnects, please.
Great idea.
We'll call this meeting back to order. And Mr. Pohl, we were listening to your presentation at the time, and I believe as well, just for the record, that Mr. Dupont was going to seek confirmation on this matter. But is that correct, Mr. Dupont?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, then that may curtail a bit of the detail that you need to go into with respect to this, Mr. Pohl, but continue, please.
So that being said, I already stated everything on file. I don't really need to get into the nuts and bolts of the brief as it's being asked for confirmation, if that's acceptable to the panel. And with that, I think I'm good with my presentation.
That's fine. And any questions from the panel members? Ms. Nesbitt?
No questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pohl and Mr. Dupont.
Thank you very much. That concludes this matter, and that concludes all of the matters on the docket today, and this hearing is adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye.